to order the town board regular meeting for Monday, October 22nd, 2018, the time being 7:07 p.m. Ms. Eicher, will you please take roll call?
Mayor Christy Melendez,
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Ken Bennett,
Here.
Miles Baker,
Here.
Barry Wilson,
Here.
Paul Rennemeyer,
Here.
Tom Jones,
Here.
David Soslowski.
Here.
Dr. Jones, will you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance? Item 3 is review of agenda by the board and addition of items of new business to the agenda for consideration by the board. Are there any additional items the board wanted to consider this evening? If not, I would, oh yes.
Let me
Mr.
just
McCarty.
see if I can just clarify a little bit for the record. Right now, we have an agenda item C10, which is a presentation by your Water Resources Manager. We would like to take that out of order. We'll leave it on the agenda as presented, but take it out of order after item A3, after you approve the agenda tonight.
Okay.
And then Mr. Hornbeck is going to present briefly on a need to continue items C4 and C5 to a date certain, but we'll take that up at that time when we get to those agenda items so that Paul can give you the date certain to which he is asking that it be postponed.
Okay, so we don't have to pull those off the agenda
Nope.
this time.
We'll just handle it as we go along. Thank you.
Okay.
Madam Mayor, I move that we amend the agenda for this evening to move item C10 to item C1 and shift all of the other items down.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor from Mr. Rennemeyer with a second from Dr. Jones, approving and amending the agenda as presented. All in favor vote yes, opposed no. And the agenda is approved as amended. So that means that we will now move on to item C10.
Correct. Item C10 will be taken out of order at this time.
Okay. Item C10 is consideration to authorize the mayor to sign a letter of support to appoint Mick Todd to the Northern Colorado Water Conservancy District Board. Mr. Thornhill will give us a presentation. Mr. Thornhill.
It'll be a short presentation since I think you just read half of what I was going to say. But again, this is an item that authorizes the mayor to sign a letter of support for Mr. Mick Todd's application to the board and the Subdistrict Board for Northern Water. Their directors come from the 8 counties that are within the district's boundaries and are appointed by district judges to 4-year terms. Weld County has 3 positions on the board, one of which is vacated when Mr. Bruner left the board. Mr. Todd has a strong background in water resources to include serving on multiple boards as well with dealing with policy-related matters with the district itself, municipalities, and the agricultural community. The town of Windsor and Weld County would be well served to have Mr. Todd on the board serving the county. That's really all I have to say about it.
And is he a Windsor resident?
He's a resident of Greeley, and he also owns a farm north of here that he actually utilizes CBT units on as well. So he's got a lot of history with the Northern Board in the Northern District.
Mr. McCarter, do we have to make a vote then for this authorization?
I would recommend that there be a motion, second, and action taken on the motion, just to make it clear for the record.
Okay, are there any additional questions or comments from Mr. Thornhill? Seeing none, is there a motion, Mr. Soslowski?
And Madam Mayor, I would vote that the board approve and give you the authority to sign a letter of support for the appointment of Mr. Mick Todd to the North Colorado Water Conservancy District Board.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor from Mr. Soslowski with a second from Mr. Rennemeyer, authorizing the mayor to sign the letter of support to Mick Todd to the Northern Colorado Water Conservancy District Board. All in favor vote yes, opposed no. And it passes unanimously. Thank you. Moving on then, back to our regular agenda. Board liaison reports. Town Board Member Baker, Tree Board and Historic Preservation Commission.
Thank you. The tree board has not met since my last presentation. However, their meeting is tomorrow at 5 o'clock at the Recreation Center. That's it.
Okay. Town Board Member Wilson, Parks, Recreation, and Culture Advisory Board, Poudre River Trail Corridor Board.
Parks and Rec has been busy. There's been some improvements to the west shore of the Windsor Lake and some other improvements in Boardwalk Park, but mostly winterizing the park system to get ready. And then with just a reminder on the Poudre River Trail, east of Highway 257 is still under repair and construction, so that section of the trail between Windsor and Greeley is closed for another 3 or 4 weeks.
Okay.
That's it.
Mayor Pro Tem Bennett, Water and Sewer Board.
The Water and Sewer Board met on October 10th. They reviewed the town board's resolution in support of the NIST project. They also discussed increase in the cash in lieu water fee and reported that that will be updated more regularly now because of the competitive nature of water rates going up so rapidly. I'd also add that several members of the Water Board, as well as Dr. Jones, myself, Mr. Minnemeyer, and town staff went on a tour last Friday of water facilities in northern Colorado.
Okay, Town Board Member Rennemeyer, Chamber of Commerce.
The only thing I have for an update on the Chamber of Commerce is last Thursday night, the Chamber held their annual awards recognition and gala recognizing distinct businesses in Windsor for their contributions to the Chamber, as well as the outstanding support that the businesses in Windsor provide. And because Windsor is a President's Circle member, I was happy to accept on behalf of the town of Windsor this award for being a part of the President's Circle in 2018. So congratulations to us and to the residents of Windsor for supporting the chamber.
Do we have a trophy case?
We'll find someplace.
See if Eric will give us some space.
We have that display downstairs, kind of outside of the first floor meeting room, so.
Town Board Member Jones, Windsor Housing Authority, Great Western Trail Authority.
Housing Authority Board met last week, and then the Housing Authority closed on the property just north of Windsor Meadows where the new senior housing is going to be constructed. They did that, last Wednesday. The Governor's Farm sale, the offer by the Housing Authority it's still on the table, but how the Housing Authority can enter into a purchase of that on available funds that they have is kind of questionable at this time. They're working on a proposal to try and purchase those apartments. It would add 48 units of senior housing if they could. The Great Western Trail Authority applied for a Colorado the Beautiful grant through Parks and Wildlife Department, and we made a presentation last week to the Parks and Wildlife Board, and we're awaiting the results of that, waiting to hear whether we'll get the award.
Okay. Town Board Member Sislowski, Clearview Library Board and Planning Commission.
Thank you, Mayor. The library board will be meeting later in the month. We'll be meeting, in fact, Thursday, when we have our dinner with Weld, and I believe Ms. Kelly Hodling will be attending that meeting in my behalf. They have a follow-on meeting next, I believe, the following week, and I'm not sure, I think, okay.
Yeah, I believe
Board
Mr.
Member Wilson will attend in my place on that. I thank you both for covering for me. The Planning Commission did meet last Wednesday. There were no communications from the commission to the board or from the staff to the board at that meeting. There were a number of items they considered and did refer to the board that are on our agenda tonight. And I think any comments from the Planning Commission are reflected in the record.
Okay. And I have Downtown Development Authority and North Front Range MPO. The North Front Range MPO has not met since I gave my last report, and the Downtown Development Authority did meet last Wednesday, but I unexpectedly had to go out of town on business, so I was unable to attend. However, tomorrow night from 4 to 7 at the Art and Culture Building on 5th and Main Street, the DDA is having a DDA Appreciation Night. So all of the downtown businesses and business owners have been invited. We plan to share at that point in time our wayfinding signage program as well as the backlot program. Brinkman will be there to make presentation as well. Moving on to item 5 is our public invited to be heard. This is for individuals who are wishing to participate on a non-agenda item. Did we have, there was nobody on the sign-up sheet? Okay. So, is there anybody who wished to speak to the board on a non-agenda item? This would be your opportunity. Okay, seeing none, we will move on to item B, which is the consent calendar. We have 3 items on the consent calendar this evening: minutes of the October 8th, 2018 meeting, advisory board appointments, and resolution 2018-96.
Madam Mayor, I move that we approve the consent calendar as presented.
Second.
Motion on the floor from Mr. Rennemeyer with a second from Mr. Baker, approving the consent calendar as presented. All in favor vote yes, opposed no. And the consent calendar is approved as presented. Moving on to board action. Our first item this evening, C1, is resolution number 2018-94, approving an agreement for economic inducements and development incentives for EarthX lithium batteries. Legislative action with presentation from Ms. Young. Ms. Young.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and town board members. I'm here to visit with you tonight about incentive requests for EarthX lithium batteries. They are looking to relocate and expand here in Windsor, and the owners of the company have joined us here tonight as well. Currently, EarthX is located in the Diamond Valley Industrial Park. They are leasing some space and have outgrown that space. And highlighted in this map is the location off of Merchant Court that they are looking to go to. With this expansion, they will be building a new building of 4,200 square feet with some space available for additional expansion in future years. The total expansion project cost is $525,000. With this expansion, they will be able to retain 5 full-time employees and create another full-time job within the first year. With this expansion, this allows them to keep up with current demands and remain competitive within the industry. The requests that have come to us would be a combination of fee waivers and fee reimbursements. The first being the fee waivers with the administrative fee and Windsor use tax. Those fees combined would be $5,579.06. With the development fee reimbursements, these would be reimbursed within 60 days after the certificate of occupancy. Those include the sewer plant investment fee and the drainage fee for a total of $8,223.35. So the total incentive request would be $13,802.41. Listed here is the total fees that EarthX would be incurring based on their expansion. That total amount of all the fees is $54,928.80. I apologize for the very tiny writing. This is an economic impact analysis. In the highlighted area, it will show you what the impact would be to the town of Windsor with this expansion. And over a 10-year period, it would be a total of $46,975 over a 10-year period. With their incentive, the payback would be 3.1 years. $8,223.35 would be affected on the Economic Development Fund. And as you can see listed here, What we have outstanding is the Kana Hotel Group at $54,422, Da Vinci at $40,000, and Colorado Cherry Company at $8,365. Tonight, we are requesting approval of Resolution 2018-94 for the incentive agreement for fee waivers and reimbursements for the expansion of Earthex lithium batteries. Do you have any questions?
Are there any questions for Ms. Young? Any comments? Okay. Seeing none, then I would seek a motion.
Madam Mayor, I move that we approve resolution number 2018-94.
Second.
Motion on the floor from Mr. Bennett with a second from Mr. Rennemeyer approving resolution and the incentive package for resolution 2018-94. All in favor vote yes, opposed no. And the resolution passes
Thank you.
unanimously. Moving on to item 2, a public hearing. A resolution approving a final major subdivision, Windsor Villages at Ptarmigan, Tom Muth, Windsor Investments LTD, the applicant, John Sweet, TST, Consulting Engineers, the applicant's representative. Quasi judicial with presentation from Mr. Hornbeck, and I would seek a motion to open public hearing.
Madam Mayor, I move that we open public hearing.
Second.
We have a motion on the floor from Mr. Redemeyer with a second from Dr. Jones approving to open the public hearing. All in favor vote yes, opposed no. And public hearing is now open.
Madam Mayor, if I may.
Yes.
With the start of the opening of the hearing, Madam Mayor, for the record, I'd like to point out that in my capacity as a town board liaison to the Planning Commission, I was present at the Planning Commission meeting during which this matter was previously discussed. I wish to state that my participation in that Planning Commission proceeding has no way influenced me in my capacity as a town board member this evening. I will make any decision and cast my vote this evening based solely on the evidence presented during this public hearing. Thank you.
Okay. And with that, Mr. Hornbeck.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Town Board. This major subdivision has been reviewed in accordance with Article 4, Chapter 17 of the Municipal Code. The subject property is located to the northwest of State Highway 392 and County Road 5. Property is zoned residential mixed use, or RMU, and comprises approximately 103 acres. The plat includes 114 single-family residential lots. The typical lot size is 7,000 to 8,000 square feet. There are 23 acres of public right-of-way dedication, 48 acres of future development tracts that have been master planned for commercial and multifamily uses. There are off-site improvements associated with the development, including the widening of County Road 5, as well as roundabouts at Oakmont Drive and 32E on County Road 5. The roundabout itself at Oakmont is shown in a schematic view here provided by the applicant. And I believe this is an older image where they may have a more recent one they'd like to share with you. The proposal was shared at a neighborhood meeting with surrounding property owners on June 14th, and a follow-up neighborhood meeting was held in September to try and further address concerns regarding mostly County Road 5 and the roundabouts from the existing Ptarmigan neighborhood. Meeting summaries of those neighborhood meetings are included in the packet materials. The Planning Commission approved the preliminary major subdivision in July of this year, subject to 2 conditions. Number 1, that all outstanding Planning Commission and staff comments shall be addressed on the final plat. And number 2, the final plat shall depict the right-of-way for Oakmont Drive shifted north to ensure it is dedicated solely from property controlled by the applicant. The applicant has continued to address the remaining comments and has since shifted County Road 5 at Oakmont further west and has shifted Oakmont north. Furthermore, the applicant has made an effort to shift the majority of right-of-way impacts from County Road 5 onto his own property to the west, while minimizing negative impacts to the adjacent Jaeger property, which is on the southwest corner of of State Highway 392 and County Road 5. The proposal is in conformance with the Comprehensive Plan, Chapter 5B Growth Framework, Chapter 5C Residential Areas Framework Plan. The notification for this public hearing, as well as the neighborhood meeting, was sent in accordance with the municipal code. At their October 17th, 2018 meeting, Planning Commission forwarded to Town Board a recommendation of approval of the final major subdivision subject to the following conditions. Number one, to the extent the approved plans for improvements to County Road 5 require construction of improvements within right-of-way not yet owned by the developer or not otherwise acquired by the town, all such right-of-way shall be acquired and dedicated by the developer to the town prior to commencement of any such improvements within said right-of-way. Number two, all improvements to the intersection of County Road 5 and Oakmont Drive shall be completed and approved by the town prior to issuance of any building permits for single-family residential development. Number three, street trees shall be incorporated into the landscape plan on both the east and west sides of County Road 5 in order to mitigate the loss of any existing trees. Number four, all remaining Planning Commission and staff comments shall be addressed prior to recording the subdivision plat. Number five, subdivision development agreement shall be executed prior to recording the subdivision plat. And number six, the applicant shall investigate the option of shifting the roundabouts on County Road 5 an additional 10 feet west. Staff requests the following be entered into the record: application, supplemental materials, staff memo, supporting documents, all testimony received during the public hearing, as well as the recommendation. I do want to note the applicant's present and I believe would like to give a presentation. So I'd like to turn it over to them unless there's any questions for myself.
Okay. Are there questions for Mr. Hornbeck or Mr. Baker?
I have a couple, but they can wait. I don't know if it matters. But
It's up to you. If
all
you
right.
want to ask them now, or
I'll wait.
you want to wait? Okay. Anybody else?
Wait for the public.
No, the applicant wants to make a presentation.
Oh, okay,
And
sure.
then we will have our opportunity to ask questions, yes, and then
Okay.
the public will.
That'd be fine.
Okay, so why don't we bring the applicant forward?
Thank you, Madam Mayor and Town Board. My name is Brian Williamson. I'm with TST Consulting Engineers. I'm a landscape architect and planner, and we work for Tom Muth, who is the developer of this property. Paul did a very good job explaining the overall development. I'm not going to rehash those. Mainly, I would like to talk about County Road 5 and the roundabouts, as those are the most contentious, contentious items for this project. But there are 114 single-family lots, 3 commercial lots, 12 tracts with open space within the single-family area, and then 6 tracts for future development, as Paul mentioned, zoned light industrial and then residential mixed use. The single-family lots is just a color graphic identifying where those lots are. There are 114 of them. The average lot size is about 7,500 square feet. The largest lot is just under 8,000. The smallest lot is just over 6,000. The 6,000 is kind of an anomaly. If you look at the average lot size, that's closer. There's one lot that's just a little bit squeezed, so that kind of throws the range excuse me, off. The total acreage of the single-family area is 35.37 acres, as Paul went through the right-of-way dedication and the open space at 23.6%. Those 3 commercial lots are adjacent to the existing Westgate Drive. They are just north of 32E, behind the 7-Eleven and the bank building there. Those are just being replatted as this area. The right-of-way is changing here, so we had to replat those lots. No real changes. They're approved lots as they are. The Planning Commission preliminary approval conditions I just wanted to demonstrate that we were meeting those. The two conditions, one, that all the outstanding staff and planning commission comments be addressed in the final plat, and then second, that the final plat depict the right-of-way for Oakmont Drive shifted north to ensure that it is dedicated solely from the property controlled by the applicant. You can see in the before and after images, we're encroaching on the Jaeger property here. You can see that we have now realigned Oakmont to be fully on the property controlled by the developer. We did hold a second neighborhood meeting. It was located at the Poudre Valley REA meeting room, and that was on September 13th. There is a summary in your packet. A couple key items. There was about 55 people there. We did elect to hold that meeting, not required by the town, but to really reach out and try to find some solutions to the contention with the County Road 5 and the roundabout improvements. There were about 55 people. I think I might have already said that. And at the end, Mr. Tom Muth was there, and at the end he determined that he would have us, the planners and engineers for it, look at moving the roundabout 10 feet, or the roundabout and the road between them, all 10 feet to the west. So we did evaluate those, and we have moved those in the plan set. So I'll be taking you through a couple of cross sections of County Road 5. There's two series of cross sections. I just want to kind of give you an overview of how we got to where we are. This is an excerpt from the Town of Windsor roadway classification system. You can see this orange line right here that runs to the edge of your growth management area is the County Road 5. That is a urban minor arterial 4 through lanes. So this improvement to County Road 5 is set forth in your roadway classification system. The improvements to this road would be coming regardless of this development or not. The benefit is that if this development is approved and constructed, the developer will build this road with some share back from the town, as opposed to the town having to build the road, the expansion of the road by itself. One key item that comes into the discussion with all the neighbors is the location of the existing sound wall along the Ptarmigan development. I'm highlighting an area here you can see in the key map that is at the center of our 5 cul-de-sacs, and the roundabout, the sound wall is located on the north side directly on the existing right-of-way line. And then as you come south here, the wall kind of meanders in 20 to 30 feet back from the right-of-way. So there is a piece of property in here that is owned and maintained by the HOA. We're going to look at 2 cross sections of County Road 5. This is the one that is all the way at the north, so that's the closest place to the sound wall. And then we'll look at another section further to the south where the sound wall is a little further back. This is the existing, all of these are going to be lined up on this dashed line, which is the section line. Traditional planning would say that you would center your road on the section line with both properties sharing the impact of that. So you can see that in the existing, it's just a little bit offset. This is the typical Town of Windsor cross-section for the minor arterial, the urban minor arterial. You can see that it would be centered on the section line. There's a 16-foot turn lane in the middle, 2 travel lanes on each side, a bike lane, curb and gutter, a tree lawn, and then the 5-foot detached walk. You can see that this is the location of the existing sound wall if we were to lay that section on top of the center line. We did work with town staff to modify that cross-section because there's a roundabout at the north end and a roundabout at the south end. There was no need for that center turn lane. So we were able to remove that 16-foot median from the middle. Is that everybody kind of following that change? So that shrunk the section quite a bit, but we were still 16 feet from the proposed travel lane to the existing sound wall. If you look at the existing conditions, we were 29 feet in the existing condition from the edge of the travel lane to the sound wall. We did work with town staff to get this modified cross-section, but they were concerned about the proximity of that travel lane to the wall. The MUTCD standards say they wanted 20 feet between the travel lane and any kind of obstruction like that wall, so we shifted the cross-section 4 feet over from the center line to the west. And then after the neighborhood meeting, so that gives us 20 feet from the sound wall to the travel lane. After the neighborhood meeting, we did shift it another 10 feet where this cross-section was cut. It's 31 feet now from the proposed travel lane to the sound wall. So If you remember, the existing conditions was 29 feet from the travel lane to the sound wall. We're now proposing 31 feet from the travel lane to the sound wall. This is the second cross-section, much more generous space down here. What we did was we took an average that's 20 to 30 feet. The wall was back, so we just used 25 as our standard. So we weren't depicting the worst or best case scenario, just the average situation there. The current distance from the travel lane to the existing sound wall is 56 feet. Again, laying the typical section in there, the travel lane would be 35 feet from the sound wall. Then we have our modified cross-section, which was 44 feet from the sound wall. These are the same sections that we looked at in the north area. So I'm happy to answer any questions that you have on these cross-sections, and I'm moving through them a little bit quickly, just in the interest of time. And then after we've made the 10-foot shift, there's now 48 feet from the edge of the travel lane to the sound wall. So in both of these scenarios, we've actually moved the road further away, the travel lane further away from the sound wall. That's not to say that there won't be improvements that are closer. The bike lane, the curb and gutter, those will all be closer to the sound wall than the existing travel lane. But really, the way the road is out there, we wanted to compare an apples to apples, so the existing travel lane to the wall in all cases. This is a section of County Road 5 south of the Oakmont roundabout. This is a landscape median, so that's the 16 feet that we brought back into it. This is from the edge of the travel lane to the sound wall is 27 feet. That's the same as it is existing. So there's no change to this section. All of the improvements happen from the edge of the travel lane to the west. Now I just want to take you through the two roundabouts. This is the roundabout of County Road 5 and 32E. This was the layout of the roundabout prior to the 10-foot shift. This is kind of a garish graphic, but the red is the original layout of that roundabout, and then the gray is the 10-foot shift. You can see that we moved everything just exactly 10 feet to the west. What you can see is here was the previous impact around the golf course, and now this gray line is the impact around the golf course. So that's the 10-foot shift there. And then this is just a cleaned up version of the final alignment of that. So it's a little more legible. The same thing with the roundabout at County Road 5 and Oakmont. This was prior to the 10-foot shift. Those dimensions are a little bit hard to read here, so I'm going to actually go to our composite. So we were previously 27 feet from the sound wall to the travel lane. Now we're 37. In this location, we were 27. Now we're 38. Down here, we were 20, now 27, and here 21, and now 28. These are not just the simple 10-foot add, because as we shifted it 10 feet to the west, these are tangent to the travel lane, so from the sound wall to the travel lane, so it didn't get the full 10 feet there, but you're looking at an average add of about 7 feet in the, giving more space from the edge of the travel lane to those sound walls. And then here's just the final cleaned up version of that. Yes?
What is the distance from the sound wall currently, without the roundabout, the existing, that corner?
The existing road, so if we came up to right here, you can see that the edge of the travel lane is right here.
Mm-hmm.
This is a 12-foot lane, so I would say that we are probably 9 or so feet through there. So they would have, in this location, 37 plus 9, if I do my math right, it's 46 feet. Now, I would like to point out that this line right here is the existing right-of-way. So County Road 5 is a small road in a larger right-of-way right now. So, you know, the existing right-of-way is quite a bit away from the edge of the pavement. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, 9 feet.
Yep.
Well,
Did you? This is a graphic similar to the one that Paul had in his presentation. This was the right-of-way acquisition required from the homeowners association before the 10-foot shift. There was 2,184 square feet required. After the 10-foot shift, you can see this is the graphic I think that Paul was using. 1,118 square feet required from the HOA, so a 49% reduction. And just so we're clear, the right-of-way required there, 478 feet is required for the actual roadway, but 640 feet of that is required for this sidewalk connection from the existing right-of-way around to where we would have a crossing at the top, at the north end of the roundabout. This is a comparison of the right-of-way dedicated on each side of the roundabout. You can see again the green for the road and the pink for the walk, and you can see on the west side of the roundabout, sorry, north is to your right here. On the west side of the roundabout, we're dedicating quite a bit more space on this as we continue to shift the roundabout to the west. There are some regional benefits to this project to increase the capacity on Larimer County Road 5, to reduce congestion, in addition to bike lanes on County Road 5, the 10-foot regional trail, and then general improvement to the existing Ptarmigan subdivision for the access getting in and out of that subdivision. We've had a couple people in previous hearings and at the neighborhood meeting express concern that when traffic gets backed up from 392, it's really hard for them to get out. So the roundabout and then the additional capacity in County Road 5 should help all of those issues. I do want to talk a little bit about the conditions of approval that were approved at the Planning Commission meeting last Wednesday. The condition 6 that I'd like to speak about first was added at the meeting. That is that the applicant shall investigate the option of shifting the roundabouts on Larimer County Road 5 an additional 10 feet to the west. We did spend a fair amount of time looking at that between these two meetings, and we have a graphic for that, but moving that to the west increased the impact on both the property, the subject property, and the Jaeger property, which is to the south. The reason for that is as you move the roundabout over the whole, we have to tie into County Road to 392 at the same place. So as you move the roundabout over, that road shift starts to infringe more on the Jaeger property as well as the subject property. It was not possible to eliminate the requirement for acquisition of property and easements from the HOA completely, and the shift required the elimination of the truck apron and putting the pedestrian connection closer to the traffic, both of which we had concerns about and staff agreed was not a viable option. This is a graphic of that. What we did was we moved the edge of the roundabout in this location and this location so that the back of the curb, so all of the travel surface, was within the existing right-of-way. I think that, but the challenges with this were we did remove the truck apron, which we feel is a slight safety concern. The truck apron is an additional 5 feet of pavement beyond the vertical curb, so that if large vehicles come through the roundabout, they have a little bit of relief to bump up on there. All the turning movements for large trucks fit within the actual designed roadway. That's not to say that there aren't trucks that maybe are cruising through the roundabout a little bit faster or not taking the time to follow those movements completely. The project would build the walk that was existing in the existing right-of-way, and then we would either need a easement, a public access easement from the HOA, or the HOA would be able to make that connection to the walk at their own cost. We'd be happy to build it if they granted us the easement to build it. But the option was not really acceptable to the town or really to us because of the removal of the truck apron, and you still would have to make the acquisition of the right-of-way and the easements from the HOA. So it really wasn't solving very many problems. Where the roundabout was after the 10-foot shift is pretty well balanced. We're a little bit closer to the new homes on the west side than we are to the existing homes, but I think Tom was willing to move that to the west to really try to minimize the impact that we were having on the existing subdivision. The second condition I'd like to talk about a little bit was condition number 2. All improvements to the intersection of County Road 5 and Oakmont Drive shall be completed and approved by the town prior to the issuance of any building permits for single-family residential development. That's a mouthful. The developer would like the town board to evaluate some alternatives to that condition. Tom Muth is the developer of the property. He was planning on being here tonight. He determined that it was probably not in anyone's best interest for him to be here. He originally developed the Ptarmigan subdivision. He is now developing the villages right next door. He's very emotionally invested in both projects, and recently I think he's doesn't want to let his emotion get the better of him in front of you. So he's elected to let us represent him tonight in this capacity. He does send his regards. Condition number 2. So restricting the building permits to completion of all the public improvements is not typically a condition of approval that we would see in a development like this. Usually the applicant and staff work through the timing of phasing and the issuance of building permits through the development agreement. So it's a little bit out of step. We didn't actually have a chance to discuss this condition with staff before it was added to the Planning Commission packet. So we were caught a little unawares that this was going to be a condition, and there are solutions to this issue. We feel like there are options that will get to the same goals that the town may have here, but we haven't really had a chance to discuss those with staff. The project is currently under contract for sale, but this condition would jeopardize that contract and generally the project as a whole. I know that's not a condition that you're probably going to weigh a lot. That's not really your problem. That's definitely Tom's problem, but there is some momentum with this project right now, so we would like to just make you aware of that. So what we're asking is just the ability to work through this condition with staff and not have it as a condition of approval. We're offering a few alternatives: one, to remove the condition; two, to direct staff to resolve the issue during the negotiations of the development agreement; and three, to tie the issuance of the building permits to the acquisition of the right-of-way for those improvements and not the full construction of these improvements. The developer in no way is asking for relief of any of the following responsibilities for the health, safety, and welfare of the town's residents, town's future residents, contractors that may be working, or neighbors to the project. And we're not looking for any relief from the construction of the County Road 5 improvements or the roundabouts. If you look at the map here, we have spent a fair amount of time working on construction phasing. The project would be built, as far as the public improvements are concerned, Westgate would be built first. Then the roundabout at Westgate and 32E would be built, so that as County Road 5 is under construction, there is a detour for all the County Road 5 traffic that comes through down to 392. What that means is this roundabout is the last public improvement that could be constructed. So that means that the development would have to construct all of the public improvements for the entire subdivision before being able to pull any building permits. We do have 2 points of access at the roundabout at County Road 5 and Westgate, and then at Westgate and 392. So I think we can work through these concerns with staff about health, safety, and concern. Now, we're not trying to put anybody in a bind, but there is some phasing that we would like to discuss with staff to eliminate this concern. I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have, and I would like the opportunity to respond to any issues that come up in public comment if there's anything that we would like to just comment on during the public comment.
Questions, Mr. Baker?
Sure. I love roundabouts, but all the traffic that is on County Road 5, is that the best alternative? Have you guys done traffic studies and all of that?
Yes, and staff has agreed that the roundabout is the best solution to there. It doesn't meet the intersection spacing for a signalized intersection.
That's what I thought.
Yeah, so it's just too close to 392. So the roundabout is really the best option there. It will allow free-flowing traffic through there most of the time. I mean, it's a busy road. There's going to be traffic backing up there at high volume times. Any intersection is going to have that issue. But I think we've come to the term. We started with a more traditional layout there and then have moved to the roundabout at the direction of our traffic engineer and town staff.
And will it be 2 lanes from 32 to 392?
No,
4 lanes, 2 in each direction.
Let's see here. Let me just get back to one of these details of the roundabout. Bear with me through my multitude of cross sections. So this is 32E, but both roundabouts have the exact same layout. There are 2 lanes running northbound and 2 lanes running southbound, and then there'll be 1 lane running east-west through each one. Okay. And those 2 lanes will be extended all the way to 32E. So we'll taper at the north end of the property, and then there'll be 4 lanes, 2 southbound, 2 northbound, from the north roundabout all the way through to 32E. I'm sorry, all the way through to 392.
Okay. And can you talk, will the bike lanes or pedestrian, you talked about 10-foot path?
Yes.
Will that be on both sides
The 10-foot trail is on the west side of County Road 5, adjacent to the new development. We did go through, let me just jump all the way back to the end of the presentation here. So it's on the west side here with the new improvements. There are no sidewalks existing on the east side. There's also no access on the east side. On the north side is the golf course. There's no sidewalk on 32E. There is a sidewalk that comes out at Oakmont, and we've provided a crossing at the roundabout, just on the north side of the roundabout for that connection. It seemed that there are more points of destination in the future to the west, and really there wasn't hardly any points of destination that were going to be forthcoming on the east. So by putting the people on the west side of the street, it really made it easier, like as you approach these roundabouts, to get into the future commercial areas and things like that.
Thank you.
So just for clarification,
Yes.
sidewalks are only, the sidewalk is only on the east side,
That's correct.
along that whole entire corridor?
That's
West.
the west side.
I mean,
Sorry.
the west side. I
Yes.
mean, the west side. There's nothing on the east side.
That's correct. There's nothing. There's no sidewalk on the east
I thought
side.
in your breakdown, it looked like there was, it was
In
on
the-
both sides.
In the typical Windsor cross-section, there is a sidewalk on both
Okay.
sides, a 5-foot detached walk. But we've basically combined those two 5-foot detached walks to the 10-foot roadside trail. And that trail is consistent with the with your open space and trails plan.
So that trail will stay.
Excuse me?
That, the trail on that side will stay?
Yeah, we'll have a 10-foot trail detached on the west side.
Okay.
You mean on the east and the west?
No.
Yeah.
No,
Just the west
Nothing
side.
on the,
because she's pointing to the east side on her screen here.
Yeah, what is that?
The side
See
where there's
that
not a
little-
bike, is there's a
Yeah.
bike lane on both sides?
There's a bike lane on both sides.
Okay, so that's what's.
That's
okay.
Yeah,
That's
I'm
part
sorry,
of
there's a
that.
bike lane on both
So there will be a
sides.
bike lane on both sides.
Correct.
okay.
Trail only on the west.
Right.
Yes.
Okay?
If the roundabout wasn't put in there at Oakmont I'm referring to, would there be room for left turn lanes going both ways?
I don't know the direct answer to that question. I'm not sure if Dennis or John would have a.
Excuse me, I'm John Sweet with TST. Could you say the question again? You mean
Right,
separate
if-
separate left turns?
If the roundabout wasn't put in, would there be room for a left turn lane going west and a left, and a right, and a left turn lane coming east into Ptarmigan?
You mean a more standardized intersection?
I guess. I mean, you've got 2 lanes going each way normally, right?
Right, and then a dedicated left turn,
And a dedicated left turn.
right, like a northbound left turn into the new development, and maybe a
Yes.
southbound left turn into the existing development?
Yes.
We have looked at that, and that's basically more of a standardized intersection. And I don't think that works unless you do a stop sign, like a 4-way stop at that intersection, and that's not something the town was interested in really pursuing. I don't know if Dennis wants to chime in on that. A 3/4 movement was also discussed, and that kind of came along also after discussing with staff. So at the end of the day, there's been a lot of discussion over the last at least a year about this intersection, and the roundabout continues to be the optimal alternative.
In the traffic studies that were done, were they, what times did you focus in on that it's really, really heavy? Is it all day? Is it an hour or 2 in the morning or afternoon?
The traffic study conforms to the requirements of the town of Windsor, but they do evaluate the AM and PM rush hours and then general operation outside of those. Does that answer your question?
So even general operation, it was pretty heavy
Yes.
outside of the rush hour?
Yeah, I think that if you look at the long-term forecasting on County Road 5, I think you're gonna have a real problem waiting for a clear space to make those lefts as you have 2 lanes of traffic coming at you.
Okay?
Thank you. Two quick things, I guess, and since you have this up, if you can go to the 32E roundabout?
Sure.
And I guess what I've struggled with is, I see, and you depict well, I think, the existing right-of-way.
Yes.
And that's the dashed line kind of running pretty
Yeah, it
close to the
runs-
word concrete and then across from that intersection.
That's correct.
If the town wanted to, Paul, could we build a road right to that right-of-way? I mean, would we ever do that, or would we always try to have some spacing?
I don't know if Dennis has any past experience, but I think we typically we would have the right to build it right up to
Right.
the right of way. I think we typically would not do that. Their typical section would have, for an arterial, would have a sidewalk and a landscape buffer.
So even if we were to build this ourselves, according to the color coding of that the gentleman introduced, if we wanted to put a 4-lane road in there, we probably couldn't, given the existing right-of-way.
I'm not sure I can answer that.
With the buffer and the bike lane, the right-of-way is big.
It's a constrained right of way with the existing development.
Yeah.
The TSD consultants, and they've looked at it in more detail, what could or couldn't fit, so I defer to them as
Okay.
that.
I guess, and let me ask the next question, because it maybe address both. So I see that your client has accommodated by moving these roundabouts 10 feet to the west. And so I see how it lays out in this section, at least depicted in here, roughly a little bit south of Oakmont and then a little bit north of 32E. But what happens outside of that image? I mean, is County Road 5 going to be coming like this and then curve over here and then curve back to where it exists now?
No, the exit out of the 32E roundabout will tie back into the existing County Road 5. So there would be an interim solution our project is responsible for improving the frontage along our project. So there is an interim solution where we design the 2 lanes coming out of the roundabout, and then they taper to 1 lane and get back on the existing road there. As that property develops, they'll be responsible for developing their frontage for the full 4-lane minor arterial section.
It just seems like we're establishing a center line on a new piece of road that is not in keeping with the center line on everything else on the road, the existing road.
That's correct. I think when we looked at the 10-foot shift, we were able to accommodate some of that movement through the roundabout. So as you come into the roundabout, if you look, the lanes aren't exactly lined up. If you come like down here before you start into the turning movements, if this were to extend north, we have absorbed some of the 10-foot shift through the roundabout. So, we're probably 10-foot offset from we're in this scenario down here, we're 14 feet off of the center line. And then in this scenario up here, we're closer to 4 plus 5, like about 9 feet. And then it slowly tapers back onto the existing road.
Okay.
One more question. You're shifting up at Oakmont, you're shifting over onto private property, or your Moose property, is that correct, to accommodate the?
That's correct.
Okay. Has Larimer County weighed in on any of this right-of-way stuff we're talking about? Or?
Yeah, Larimer County is a referral agency of the town of Windsor, and they did submit comments. And I believe those are probably not in your packet, but they did have some concerns about the proximity to the the existing residents. They have not seen a plan set since we've moved the road 10 feet. So I'm hoping that this shift has really satisfied some of their concerns.
Okay, and Larimer County, that's their maintenance, that road's their maintenance right now, is that correct?
No, Larimer County Road 5 has been annexed to the town of Windsor and is a Windsor road. The only right-of-way that would be Larimer County's right-of-way is Oakmont.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I have one more question. And I know you've answered this, but can you talk again about, were you to shift this further west, you would be taking a bunch of the Jaeger or needing more Jaeger, is that what?
That's correct. Let's go to overall overview here. So we did speak a little bit about what you could absorb as far as the shift through the roundabout. So we've in order to tie into the 392 intersection, we have absorbed as much as we could in this roundabout. So for every foot that we move this, it's going to impact back, the ripple effect is going to come back down into the Jaeger property.
Keep it straight.
Yeah, so in a road like this, you have a 1 to 8.5 foot taper. So that means for every 1 foot you move it horizontally, you have 8.5 feet of run to make that. So basically you're not, it's a nice even transition. So for moving it 10 feet, you have to, those impacts ripple back 800 feet, I'm sorry. It's 80, yeah. Is that right, John? Help me with my math. This is the engineer's world, not.
So the redirect taper is actually 45 to 1 in this area. So
There we go. So,
because
just a little bit off.
when we shifted the roundabout over the first 10 feet, we've had to blend that back into the Jaeger and take a portion of the Jaeger property as we come back towards 392. Our instructions from the town are that we need to get back on the section line as we approach 392, so we don't end up shifting anything at that intersection towards the west. So the first 10-foot shift has already taken a portion of their property. A continued shift continues to take additional pieces of their property. And I don't know if you're aware that there is somebody living in the home there, which we're already impacting. So we're trying to be extremely conscious of any pulling that road even closer to their front door.
So you're gonna keep the 392, I'll call it the center line as is, and then
Once we
slowly shift to the west?
Our instructions are that we cannot pull any portion of the 392 County Road 5 intersection to the west, so we need to be back on to that section line when we get to that intersection. So as we move north, we start to kind of pull over, we make a radius and start to pull over, but we have to clip the Jaeger property in order to get to a roundabout that's now been shifted off the section.
Okay.
So, does that make sense?
Yep, thank you.
Additional questions?
No.
I have one question. When you're coming off of 392 and you're turning to go north,
Mhm.
is that right now just still a single lane?
So there
Because
are.
I think one of the improvements that I think that we've been talking about is adding an additional turning lane there to alleviate.
Yes.
So is that part of this plan as well, or?
So the improvements from the south property line to 392 are not part of this plan set, but we are designing them and running them concurrently as an off-site set. So they're not part of this approval tonight, but we are developing those. We have been working with the town and FHU, who did a master plan and then looked at that intersection specifically.
So at least your team is aware of that and working your plan in conjunction with whatever our plan might be.
Yes, most definitely.
Because I'd hate one thing to.
We're not gonna build something that doesn't work in the
overlap, or we have to come back and
ultimate.
redesign or do something at another point in time, because nobody knew what somebody else was gonna
Yeah,
be doing.
no, we have been hopefully walking lockstep with the staff on those improvements.
Okay. Additional questions? If not, this would be the time that we will now open this up for the public hearing. Please step forward one at a time, state your name and address for the record. Then Crystal will start the clock and you each have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Town Board. I am Doug Williams. I live at 7208 Tamarisk Drive. I am Secretary Treasurer of our 40 patio home, Ptarmigan Villas. And I'll just wish to make a few brief comments. We appreciate so much that has been done and tried and looked at. Unfortunately, we still can have very serious concerns and feel that with the location and some design elements for County Road 5 and request that they be addressed prior to approval. We have a different vision. We're not, and I'll walk you through a packet that we have. In fact, we've provided a folder for you, and I ask that that be made part of the record. Inside the folder, it looks like this. It has the letter from Larimer County. They are the referral agency. They are the one that represents those of us that actually live in Ptarmigan, in that we are technically Larimer County residents. They expressed 11 concerns, one of which was that the right-of-way should be moved west. We're disappointed. We're hoping that there would be an additional 10 feet with, following the planning meeting. We're sorry to hear that that doesn't sound feasible. Our vision is different. We're looking broader than existing right-of-ways. We're looking at what land is available, and hearing your discussion, y'all too were, it sounded to me like looking, okay, what do we do with current right-of-ways? We're looking at a broader picture. Mr. Muth describes, and as I've said, passionately about the desire to extend Ptarmigan, and we like the idea of residential property, but and encouraged to look beyond current right-of-way for it. Look at the photograph, and my clock is really running here. There's a photograph here that shows, the best that I can read, 80 feet is how far into the current development that will be needed to put this roundabout in. The two travel lanes are to the right of that big cottonwood tree. The current plan with the additional 10 feet still puts those two roundabouts or two travel lanes to the right of that cottonwood. That car there on the left-hand edge is driving north on County Road 5. So that's the western edge and looking back to the right. So we just have a different vision, and we ask that this be continued to be looked at and studied before it is approved. Thank you.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of the Town Council. My name is John Truesdell. I live at 7426 Tamarisk Drive, approximately 400 feet east of Oakmont and County Road 5. This town board has the opportunity to prevent error tonight and an injustice that is about to be done. That is the approval of this subdivision and accompanying County Road 5 design as presented. We understand that professional momentum has gathered around the concept of this roundabout. But let's look at what really happens. Consider the pictures, the photos that you're looking at, the extent of the incursion of County Road 5 roundabout into Ptarmigan. If you look at that, here's what's going to be the result if this board approves what is presented tonight. Muth gets what he wants. He gets more dollars for his ground. That's fine. Windsor gets what it wants, developer assistance in building County Road 5, and future revenue, future revenues for permit fees and sales tax. Well, what happens to Ptarmigan? Ptarmigan's entry is severely compromised, losing approximately 1/3 of its existing length. Much of the mature present landscaping and attractiveness will be destroyed. North-south County Road 5 traffic moves further eastward into Ptarmigan, as is shown by the applicant's own aerial. And how can we not conclude that this incursion into Ptarmigan causes indisputable economic loss to the Ptarmigan subdivision? And the question I think the board should ask is, should Ptarmigan be just collateral damage to Mr. Muth's real estate ambitions across County Road 5? I ask you, why isn't Mr. Muth here tonight to advocate and defend the plan he's put forward? Why have only his engineers been assigned to do this? If you look at the facts in this, we are the ones at Ptarmigan who have presented to this board the copy of the email from Tracy Shambo of Larimer Engineering to this board. It's important to note this letter has never been included as part of the documents in the development packet, and the specific issues have been brushed aside by the engineers.
Madam Mayor, town board members, good evening. My name is Mayo Summermeyer. I'm president of the Master Homeowners Association of Ptarmigan. I live at 7425 Varden Way in the subdivision. Our master board has met again today, and we are consistent in our position that a fairly simple solution in our mind really works here. We simply want to have the roundabout moved sufficiently to the west that it doesn't involve any Ptarmigan HOA property. If that's done, we're through, and we probably won't bother anybody again about this thing. One of the tragedies is we were not involved in this very early on at the conception stage. We were involved after there was a lot of engineering. The platting had already been done, and all of a sudden we find out what's going on. Mr. Moose basic objections to moving this out of our hair, if you will, is that it will encourage additional design fees. We grant that. He also is concerned that it would compromise some lots, which he planned himself long before all of this was approved and put together, and it will require some right-of-way acquisition that he doesn't have. To move it off of our backyard will require that he maybe take a little land from the Jaeger property. So maybe it's easier to take our ground than it is Jaeger's property. I don't know. But we think that moving this simply to the west is a fairly simple solution. One of the things that it will eliminate, right now, there's going to have to be a condemnation of the property that you're going to take from those two corners, and you've seen them on the drawings, or I think they're a different color. That condemnation will not be a friendly condemnation. Not that we're necessarily against it, it's just that we cannot convey that property to anybody as an HOA, because in order to convey the property, we need to have 80% approval of the owners, which would be everybody in the Ptarmigan subdivision. Can't get that. You'll never get that. So you're going to have an unfriendly condemnation. Your town council can explain to you the consequences of doing that, but they can delay the subdivision for quite a while some questions are resolved concerning public benefit and so forth. But that's not a threat, I'm just saying, and the HOA will probably not take any position, but any owner who's aggrieved, some of whom you're hearing from tonight, will have the ability to do that. My comments have been made a part of the record this evening, and I would request on behalf of the HOA that you simply require this roundabout be moved, the additional footage that it requires to get it off of us, 10, 15, 20, 30, I don't know what it is. Thank you for your attention.
Madam Mayor and members of the board, my name is Lee Summers, and we live at 5101 Nelson Court in Ptarmigan, and our lot is at the northeast corner of where the roundabout will be located. We've been members of Ptarmigan since 1994, so we've seen a lot of changes occurring within the subdivision as well as along County Road 5. Related to the earlier question about traffic studies, another factor that always enters into this is County Road 5 is a very desirable alternative to Interstate 25 whenever there's a problem. And so no matter what time of the day it is, if something happens on I-25, County Road 5 will back up. My wife and I are very supportive of the development that's being proposed. We're also supportive of the roundabout, even though it's going to be very close to our backyard. Our primary request is that it be moved off of Ptarmigan HOA land, moved to the west in order to provide some additional flexibility as far as overall development. So I guess my request to the board would be that any approval of the plan would include a requirement that the roundabout be moved to the west to not utilize any HOA land that's available. And I had a brief video to give you a perspective as to, I just wanted to go up on our balcony and overlook where the roundabout will be, and to give you a perspective. It's that top one. So this is, okay. Hopefully I won't use up my time. So this is looking off of our balcony, and if you look at this picture, the roundabout will come in beyond this cottonwood tree all the way to the irrigation controller that you see there. So trucks such as this are very common, and they will be coming within 40 feet of our backyard. So personally, we're quite concerned about the location of the roundabout. We're supportive of the overall plan. We think a roundabout is probably a reasonable way to go as far as addressing some of the traffic issues, but it would definitely have an impact on us personally. And I just hope that you see what the right thing would be in this particular case. So thank you very much.
Is there anybody else?
Madam Mayor, Town Council, Town Manager, and Town Attorney. My name is Gordon Hadlow. I live at 5320 Augusta Trail in the Ptarmigan subdivision, and I'm a member of the Ptarmigan Master Board. Having reviewed this, we find that the roundabout still encroaches on the common property of the association. I don't have a graphic, but I think it's page 78 in your packet that you've got that shows the roundabout, and it shows how far in it comes and how much land it takes as it currently is presented. It severely impacts Mr. Summers' home that he just talked about, as well as the home on the southeast corner as well. Both of those take the brunt of this particular roundabout. This entrance at Ptarmigan to Oakmont has been in existence for 25 years now, and I don't particularly understand why that has to be impacted by a new development. In other words, I think the new development should absorb the problems that we have here. I reviewed the 6 conditions that are placed on this, and they're very helpful, but I think they're not complete. And I would like to recommend 2 things. Number 1, that there be no relief on item number 2 that was requested. And then secondly, that item number 6, which is a suggestion of moving the roundabout 10 feet, be changed to require the roundabout not to encroach on any of the current Ptarmigan common land. Thank you for allowing me to make the presentation.
Is there anybody else who wishes to address the board on this agenda item? Okay. I think I heard the applicant say, did you want to come forward to respond to some of the things?
Just 2 quick things, Madam Mayor. One, the road is actually to the west of the existing cottonwoods that are along County Road 5. I think you may have been speaking about the cottonwood that is in the median. I just wanted to clarify the difference between the two. The existing cottonwoods that are in the right-of-way at County Road 5, the road will be to the west of those. And then secondly, we have been meeting with the HOA since early in the spring of this year. We have made some design changes based on their feedback, eliminating the walk on the south side of Oakmont, eliminating the crossing on the south side of the roundabout to minimize the impact there. So I think it's fair to say that we have been working with them for quite a while, prior to our preliminary approvals from the Planning Commission, which happened in July. So we have really been trying to reach out to them and work with them throughout the entire process. I'm happy and available to answer any questions
Are there
anyone may
additional
have.
questions, Mr. Baker?
It was suggested that this roundabout is going to encroach 80 feet into the entrance. Can you pull up your graph,
Sure.
your picture?
think this one is as good as any. What you see here highlighted in the green and the pink is the right-of-way acquired. The in between these two right-of-ways is the existing county right-of-way. So if you were to go from the, this exhibit does not show the current right-of-way. Let me see if we can find something that's a little more descriptive. Yeah, so I think if you came back to the improvement of the sidewalk crossing, here is the existing right-of-way. I think it's possible that that's 80 feet there. But it's not encroaching in the property owned by the HOA, it's encroaching into the existing county right-of-way.
And traffic won't be 80 feet into the traffic lanes
That's correct. The traffic lanes they end right here.
about where the sound wall.
Yeah, if you were to project it north and
Makes
south,
sense.
it'd be about where the existing sound wall is. And that's only in the, the easternmost travel lane coming through there for just the extreme piece of that.
And were you to move this further, is the land required from Jaeger greater than the land required for this from the HOA?
By far. I don't have an exact square footage for you, but, we're down to 1,100 square feet required from the HOA. The Jaeger property, because of I think the difference is that there's these two corners that we're clipping in the HOA property. The Jaeger improvements would run the length of their property.
What is that lot Q or something on the southwest?
This area right here?
Yeah.
So that's tract Q, so that's slated for future development in the master plans contemplated as multifamily.
And that is owned by Mr. Moo?
That's correct. Are you wondering about where the Jaeger property starts? So where that shading stops at the bottom of tract Q is where the Jaeger property starts. This entire piece is the Jaeger property.
Did you have any additional questions,
I'm good.
Mr. Baker?
Thanks.
Okay, Mr. Jones?
So I guess just to clarify, if you did move it off of the HOA, what the HOA is concerned about, that's when you get into issues with the Jaeger property. I mean, that would be more than the 10 feet you're suggesting.
That's correct. I think it's fair to say that there are already issues with the Jaeger property with the expansion of County Road 5. This will exacerbate them more. And I don't know if town staff wants to talk about that. Okay.
Are they design issues or?
Well, there's just encroachment. This existing house that you see, it's actually pretty well concealed by these trees here. Prior to moving the road, or after we moved the road, the 10 feet that was offered by Mr. Muth, the edge of the right-of-way required for the improvements of County Road 5 is about a little bit more than 20 feet from the front porch of that. So that's the required setback in the town of Windsor from a right-of-way line to a single-family house. So right now, we're at that threshold. As we move the road further to the west, I'm not sure what the policy decision would be on that.
Okay, Mr. Kozlowski?
Yes, actually, I probably have more questions for Paul, if you would do
Okay.
that now, or?
Yep.
and- I guess, first, I'm just curious if you could talk a little bit. It seems to me a stoplight intersection at those two would wreak havoc with the intersection at 392. Because if the light turned red, the traffic rather quickly would back up to the intersection. And if you would just talk a little bit about alternative methods of intersection control there, and what your thinking was, because I think the applicant's representative suggested the town preferred a roundabout for some various reasons.
Sure, he's correct in saying the town's preferred alternative for an intersection is a roundabout. You are correct that the a signal would not meet town criteria, and it's projected, I believe, at a level of service F, I believe. Really, it wouldn't function. So to invest that kind of money in something that doesn't even function, staff would not support that. Another alternative potentially would be a four-way stop. I don't know the level of service, but I believe you could envision that also functioning very poorly. I believe the final alternative, other than the roundabout, would be a limited control where there's no stop signs on County Road 5. Oakmont traffic would stop. It would require, I believe, 3/4 access, so you would not be able to turn left out of the existing Ptarmigan or the proposed development. You could turn left in or right out. So you'd be restricting current access. That's conceivably an option that would function at an acceptable level in terms of layout and impacts on the HOA right-of-way. I can't speak to the exact specifics of that. One reason the roundabout would be preferred is it provides the full access. It also allows for pedestrian access as you're able to cross with the center median when there's gaps in traffic versus there would be no crosswalk typically with a limited access 3/4 intersection, so it wouldn't really provide that access either. And one other item to add on, just to clarify for the record, the roundabouts as proposed that have been shown in drawings are in conformance with town standards, just to clarify that.
They are.
They are, yes.
And one other question, if you could talk about the thinking on the requirement number 2, the requirement that the intersections, et cetera, be constructed before permitting. What was the town's thinking in that? The department's thinking?
I might have to ask if Mr. Balstad could elaborate. I was out of the office with the new baby for some of those discussions. I can say that it is typically a development agreement item for phasing and things like that, and we would typically require all improvements to be done prior to building permits. So there is safe access provided for contractors, and we're assured that the development's completed and that we're not holding a certificate of occupancy for a new home. Someone is moving in, and we don't want to condition improvements on a occupancy when people are moving in and it's welcome to Windsor, and sorry you can't move in till the roundabout's built. That's completely outside of a homeowner's control. I don't know, Scott wanted to add anything?
The only thing I would add is this is somewhat of a unique situation, and it has been something that it's been an ongoing conversation for the last couple of months since the last neighborhood meeting with the neighbors. We've been working with Mr. Moose's team pretty regularly every week to see what can be done to shift the roundabout and to make the least impact on all of the neighboring properties. However, when we, as staff, had a discussion about how far we could go with the approvals and feel comfortable that we weren't getting the cart before the horse, that's why we included that condition that we not begin residential development until the adjacent Oakmont intersection improvements are completed. So,
The applicant's representative referenced how it's typically handled in the development agreement.
right.
And is that correct?
That is correct. In a normal situation, I guess what I'm just describing is this has kind of been a fluid conversation over the last month and a half, 2 months, and we don't want to defer that requirement and have that be a sticking point that is a sticking point between the applicant and staff. So that's why we added that condition.
At least under paragraph 1, the applicant would have already obtained all the rights of way. And I think that's going to end up being your controversial issue if this goes forward. Once those rights of way are obtained, then it's a matter of construction.
Correct. However, we don't know how that right of way is going to be maintained, whether that's going to be a request to the board for to insert the town into that process.
Right.
And we don't know how long that process might take once initiated, if initiated.
I guess one last question, Mayor, but it's really for Mr. McCarter. Thank you, Scott. Ian, I don't know, the question was raised about the unfriendly condemnation process and what that may entail. I don't know if you want to answer here or do this more in executive session. It would be legal advice, perhaps, on what may become a
I appreciate Mr. Sommermeyer's comments about it, but it really doesn't fit the subdivision approval process. It really falls outside of the criteria that you're being asked to consider tonight. So when it comes to the details and the legalities of eminent domain, I would prefer to discuss that with you in a different arena.
Got it. That makes sense. Thank you.
Well, I have two follow-up questions, one with regards to that, but also with what Mr. Ballstad stated. You said under item 2, yet this did not meet normal requirements. So what do you assess on this project as not normal?
I guess
That you're requiring this, not item 2.
the fact that we're still working on the location of the roundabout and that hasn't been answered yet. We are working with the applicant to try and allow them to get started on improvements that are on site, the internal street network for the individual single-family lots, as well as I believe their critical path is to begin work on the Westgate Drive improvements, which is the loop road that would provide the bypass during construction on County Road 5. So I believe in conversations with Mr. Muth, they would like to begin work on the Westgate Drive improvements so that they're ready to pave in the spring, and then that route will be available as a bypass for. So there are all of these, I guess, fluid moving parts is what I meant by it's kind of unique and outside the norm.
Well, and Mayor, if I can, I would say that the request from the developer of having this be considered in the development agreement, I don't really object to that. I just think that the developer needs to understand that a requirement in the development agreement may very well be that it's constructed prior to issuing building permits. So if they could offer viable ways to direct the traffic and get around in the subdivision, I don't know that we would want to completely prohibit that conversation, but right now I think that it is a concern for staff that we don't want to add to the problem on County Road 5 and cause more of a mess there by not having these improvements constructed. So if the request is just simply not make it a condition, but understand that it'd be part of the development agreement discussion and that it could very well be in the development agreement, I don't think that that's offensive, but it's just right now until we see a better plan, that is staff's inclination is to require the developer to do that prior to getting any building permits.
Mayor, if I may.
Okay,
Oh,
well,
sorry.
I have two additional questions. The first one, the next one is then, I thought the applicant had stated that you, after a neighborhood meeting in particular, you did shift the alignment of the roundabouts. Maybe not, in some cases, it was even more than 10 feet. And then I'm hearing some other testimony opposite to that nothing changed. So did a shift occur? And
Yes, the entire County Road 5 between the two roundabouts and both roundabouts shifted exactly 10 feet to the west.
so you did shift them 10 feet?
Yes, and that happened after our September neighborhood meeting.
Okay. So the ones that you showed with the red overlay represents that new,
That was the before, the red was the prior to the shift and the gray was the after the shift.
okay. And then with what the Planning Commission forwarded in terms of their recommendation, the first item, number 1, is that you are required to require before anything can move forward to have all your dedication of your right-of-way.
That's correct. We do not have a concern. We don't want to.
So do you have any right-of-way at this point in time?
Yeah, so there's the existing Town of Windsor right-of-way, and then we're dedicating new right-of-way with this plat on the west side. I think the condition 1 speaks to the right-of-way that would be required from the HOA at County Road, at Oakmont, but then also from the other 3 quadrants on the 32E roundabout, which we have agreements, both written and verbal, from the other 3 property owners, so those are not, we're not concerned about obtaining those.
On the S32E?
On the 32E, yes.
You've got those
Yes.
verbally?
Some more than verbal, but all of them verbal at least.
Okay, go ahead.
Well, I have a couple questions here, and I'm gonna try to make this make sense in my head. So I don't know if this is a question for staff or for the applicant's representative, but if the roundabout goes the 10 feet west as what's proposed, if it was to go further to the west, now with that ratio of bringing it back to the existing County Road 5, it would eat into that 20 feet between the right-of-way and the front porch of the Jaeger property. I mean,
that's correct.
And no disrespect to you as the applicant's representative, I guess that's what I wanted to hear from staff, that's what would actually happen. So even if the public got their way, now the Jaeger property would be severely impacted or really have a problem, is what I'm trying to, make sense, where I'm trying to get the common ground between the people, the project, the entryway to Ptarmigan, et cetera, to.
Yeah, and I'm happy to let your staff, but we've been trying to balance those from the.
I understand.
Yeah, we simply ask that they do what they can to locate the roundabout in such a way that it minimizes the impact to all parties involved. The 20 feet that was referenced is kind of what we've used as the standard, since that's a typical residential setback. So if we encroach any closer than the 20 feet to the front of the Jaeger structure, they wouldn't be meeting our standard setback, which would typically require a variance and require them to show a hardship. And so trying to balance between the impact of
So
both.
directly put to you, Scott, if the board said we want to move the project further to the west, okay, with the ratio that they talked about, 45-1 or whatever, forgive me for not knowing that, that would impose on that 20-foot setback that we're talking about from the right-of-way to the front door of the structure. I'm not suggesting we're doing that, I'm just trying to get, so basically by the shift of the 10 feet to what's proposed right now, that still with the ratio allows the curves, the alignment, et cetera, of the road to still meet our standard, and anything more than that would potentially cause other difficulties on the west side of the county road.
That's my understanding from Mr. Muth's team. They're the ones engineering it, and they would be more familiar with that dimension. But that's my understanding, is it would encroach.
Yeah, at this point, we don't have an approved design. Since the neighborhood meeting in September, we've moved the roundabout over 10 feet, and we've kind of blended that back in, but nothing has gone back to the town for any type of approval, so I can't tell you for sure what is.
So in essence, we don't have an answer to what my question is to definitively know.
I can tell you right now, we're kind of just over 20 feet from the front door of the existing Jaeger house, and as we continue to move the roundabout further west, we continue to eat into that room. Whether or not a variance would be approved by the town staff, I'm not sure.
Okay, I just wanted to know how that potentially would align there.
It's difficult for me to answer without having submitted this design for review and approval with the town as it is right now. There's a lot of other complicating issues that come up, including existing utilities, like existing manholes that are in County Road 5 right now that need to be placed within the median itself or outside of any travel, outside any wheel path. So there's a lot of things at play when we just say that we can try and shift the roundabout over a little bit.
Well, one of the other questions that I had, and you'd probably be the perfect one to ask this of, is as we play with this roundabout and how it comes back into the existing County Road 5, at what point, if at all, does this affect CDOT's intersection at 392 and 5, as far as even on the southbound side or the northbound side, north of 392?
And to answer that question, we can't even do the redirect taper with the shift that we're currently showing, because that 45-1 takes it all the way back to the intersection. So we've had to introduce long curvature as we come through the Jaeger property in order to get the road over to the roundabout as we've currently agreed to place it. So we're already kind of trying to balance criteria in order to get ourselves back on the section line at the intersection.
Well, one of my last question that I was thinking of all this was one little comment that I believe that you gave in your earlier presentation to the other gentleman that's with you, which is the little comment of this whole project's potentially on the market by Mr. Muth to be approved and then potentially sold to another developer of some kind, et cetera. Does that potentially change how the scope of all this could be? Could we be going through all of this all over again with a new buyer of this project?
That purchaser would be buying the lots as currently shown on the.
Including
preliminary
improvements
plan.
on 5 roundabouts,
That would be,
everything?
that would be, I believe Brian was alluding to a builder purchasing the lots from Mr. Muth, as currently shown,
Not the whole development?
the single family portion.
Okay.
Did I see one question down there somewhere?
Take a number. And I guess probably for Mr. Ballstedt, because I just want to go back to that requirement number 2. I'm still struggling with what you gain by imposing it, only because, again, number 1 requires that all the rights of way be obtained. So we would at that time know how the board responded to this particular hearing. We would know that the rights of way have been obtained for where the roundabouts would be if they end up being roundabouts. So what do you gain by saying, no, you have to build all the roads first before you can, and it's requesting a building permit, not a certificate of occupancy, so.
Right, no, the comment was made, or the condition was included based on a staff conversation that deferring to a later administrative negotiation sometimes can drag out, and we come back to the same sticking points. But I think Mr. Hale indicated that he's comfortable, as am I, with deferring that to a staff negotiation, to negotiate it in the development agreement requirement.
Yeah. I mean, sort of related, but not totally. But
Mhm.
I can appreciate, as you look at this particular picture in particular, if you move the road even further west, it starts impacting the lots that run all along County Road 5 and the cul-de-sacs, and suddenly probably you have a development that has 3, 6, 9, whatever, 9 fewer lots than you have today. I'm just guessing, but, okay, well, I appreciate your response on item 2. Thank you.
I'd like to ask somebody, spokesman from Ptarmigan, if you feel confident he speaks for the development, how badly would you like to see a roundabout there, as far as you getting in and out of your properties?
Dr. Jones, there's probably not unanimity of opinion on that. I think the Master Association has felt that the roundabout is the most acceptable method of handling traffic at that intersection. I know there are alternatives, but I believe that our Master Association thinks roundabout is the way to go. In fact, I haven't heard anybody really object to it, but there may be somebody we don't know. But we believe that's the best way to handle traffic, and I know it creates some additional problems, but I think traffic movement does dictate that be the choice.
So it has been quite a problem for you?
It has been a problem, you say, I'm sorry.
Yes, I mean, turning left out of the subdivision and into it has been
Yeah, that's
a
difficult.
pretty big deal.
Getting left out of Oakmont and heading south at certain times of the day is not only a problem, but probably kind of dangerous. So roundabout works well, thank you.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Any additional questions?
I don't know if I have questions, more of a comment. It seems like, as I take
Thi-
this in.
This is public hearing, so it would not be a comment
Okay.
period until we move to
Okay,
the
sorry,
next
excuse
phase.
me,
Public,
Mayor.
yeah, this is public hearing. If you have questions.
Any other questions?
Okay. I would just caution you.
Okay.
I do, I have maybe the final question, I don't know. So the stipulation here is, and it doesn't have to fall in that order, that what the planning commission gave the recommendations, that one, they have to acquire dedication first, and then two, make the improvements prior to the issuance of the building permits. And I'm getting the sense, all right, that the big issue is the Oakmont one, not necessarily the E32. So what happens if we approve and they commence, they're gonna come, and he's already told us they're gonna do this in phases, but, so he's ready to go with Westgate, he can proceed with E32, but he's not gonna be able to do anything then unless he gets Oakmont, correct? Is that right? Or can he be working all of that simultaneously?
What the applicant has expressed to staff is they intend to start on the north end, build that roundabout. I believe Westgate would be constructed first, maybe then the north roundabout, with the south roundabout being constructed once that detour has been
Right. But
constructed.
so all that could happen though, even previous to having any of the dedication down in Oakmont? Or is it gonna be imperative that Oakmont, dedication has to happen before you can even do either of those two things?
Those improvements could commence prior to the Oakmont dedication.
Okay.
Can I respond? I mean, the way the condition's worded, we understand that no work on County Road 5, which would include the Westgate 32E roundabout, could commence until all of the rights-of-way were acquired.
Okay.
That's our reading of that condition.
And is that what you would intend to do, is to not move forward with any of this part of the project until all of those requirements,
I think
until you
as
have?
those proceed, we would start with on-site development. So we could build Westgate, basically from this point all the way up to as you approach the intersection. We could build any on-site streets prior to that, that trigger for County Road 5 improves, but we couldn't make any improvements to County Road 5, either roundabout or the connecting space in between them, until after all of the right-of-ways were acquired. That's our interpretation of the condition.
The intent of number one is just that before any construction can take place on right-of-way that needs to be acquired, I guess I should say that the other way, we can't allow them to construct improvements on right-of-way that hasn't been dedicated to the town yet. So it's possible that they could firm up the verbal and other agreements with the 32E improvements and get started on those improvements while they're still working on the Oakmont right-of-way acquisition. So the intent was, if the right-of-way has not yet been dedicated, they can't be working on that property yet. So that's all that meant.
And then to the applicant, is there any additional, I guess, additional thoughts or improvements that you think that you could make to that second roundabout? Or do you think what you've shown us tonight is?
We're continuing to try to minimize the impacts to the Ptarmigan subdivision. I think at this point, we're trying to get a ruling from the board about what your opinion on that is, so that we can begin to move forward in a more concrete manner. We've thrown a fair number of scenarios out, and the staff has been very willing to work with us kind of in a quick turnaround, evaluating things, giving feedback. We'll tweak things, come back and forth. I mean, so I think we would continue to do that. We want to minimize the impact to the existing residents, but really we feel like after the 10-foot shift, which is 14 feet off of the section line, we're really pretty close to where that roundabout really wants to be.
Okay, Mr.
I'm
Bigler.
sorry. Maybe this is oversimplifying. It sounds like they maybe want 20 feet. You said we can do 10 in the constraints of this Jaeger property. Is that fair to say?
Well, so I think that their desire, my opinion of and I don't want to speak for them because I'm not representing them, but my opinion of what they would like is they would like everything removed from their property. There's a significant amount of construction that goes into the construction, a significant amount of effort that goes into the construction of a roundabout, including some, grading easements around the back of that roundabout, things like that. To really move it so that it does not impact any of their property, I think, it's going to be a significant move, and then you're going to have this kind of crazy jog in 5 as you come into that roundabout, and then go back trying to get to the proposed cross section of County Road 5. Does that answer your question?
Yes. It seems like right now, though, I mean, any foot you can gain would be an improvement from here.
And we're trying to, there are, as John mentioned, there's some other, besides just the 2D, or the horizontal control that we're moving it, there's every foot that we move that impacts grading on both sides, it impacts the existing utilities and then the new utilities that need to be put in as well. So we have been, I believe, it's safe to say that we have made our best effort to move this. I mean, we're continuing to look at it more as we refine the plans to be final, but I think we have tried to be as accommodating as possible.
Thank you. Mr. Bennett?
No.
Oh, okay.
We
Any
talk-
final, okay.
One more. We talked about HOA ground versus right-of-way.
That's correct.
Is the HOA ground in the right-of-way?
No. So it's two different property owners. So the right-of-way in Oakmont is owned by the county. The right-of-way in County Road 5 is owned by the town. And then the HOA owns the open space tracts that are adjacent to those two rights-of-way.
Any final questions? Okay, then I would seek a motion. Mr. McCarter, we have everything we need for the record at this point in time?
It appears so.
Okay, I'd seek a motion to close public hearing.
Madam Mayor, I move that we close public hearing.
Second.
Motion on the floor from Mr. Rennemeyer and a second from, who was over here? Mr. Wilson, to close public hearing. All in favor, vote yes, opposed no. Public hearing is now closed. Moving on to item 3, resolution number 2018-95. A resolution approving a final major subdivision, Windsor Villages at Ptarmigan, Tom Muth, Windsor Investments LTD, the applicant, John Sweet, TST Consulting Engineers, the applicant's representative. Quasi judicial, Mr. Hornbeck.
I don't have anything further to add, Madam Mayor, other than the condition of approval number 2, just as a reminder for the record to restate that if that's the inclination of the board.
Okay, questions or now comments from our town board members, Mr. Wilson?
Yeah, just some of the comments. I think the impasse here is obvious, pretty obvious to all of us, is the roundabout. And when I look at County Road 5, even if that roundabout wasn't there and we're widening it, I think, within that right of way, we're okay. It's really that section where it jogs in, and Mr. Summers, your video was very helpful to show the truck traffic and how close it is and so on. And I acknowledge that that's an issue, and that's probably the big sticking point. But the big thing is, I'm not sure how the folks that live on the Yeager property feel about all this, but I think, we're at the point where I think the developers have tried to move it as much as they can, but we're kind of stuck up against that obstacle. And so that's kind of where we're at. So I don't know if we have a solution that's gonna make everybody happy.
Madam Mayor, I know the Ptarmigan residents aren't our constituents, but I think we have to pay attention to their concerns. I don't think I could vote for this resolution as it's presented now. And I wondered if it would be appropriate. I think the engineer has admitted he has to do a little more work on the plan before it's submitted. I wonder if it'd be appropriate to table this item until we get some more information, until they've addressed it to the best of their ability. I mean, both sides are gonna have to give a little. The Ptarmigan folks want a roundabout, but they don't wanna give up any land. And I don't think that's gonna fit, that can't fit with, what the developer needs to do there, so maybe there's a little time needed to try to straighten this out, if at all possible.
Is that a motion?
No,
To,
to
okay.
table, I'm suggesting it, but I would be glad to make the motion.
Oh, did you have something?
Yeah, if you
Go
don't, just
ahead.
real quick. You know, if you look at sort of the progression of how we got here, I think what probably drives us initially is the fact that County Road 5 has become a more major north-south road than probably anyone ever anticipated. And I've driven that a fair amount, I suspect we all have, and you can be very aware of what it's like in rush hour. So it's fairly clear that that would have to become a four-lane road somewhere in the very near future. Well, then what are those intersections going to be? You couldn't leave a four-lane road with a stop sign intersection or for good reason a stop light intersection. It would be a roundabout. And so that solution seems to present itself. And my fear is at the same time, the underlying thing is that the center line of this road has to roughly be similar to what exists at 392 and what exists north of 32E. I guess my own feeling is it feels like the developer has made quite a bit of accommodation already. And we're down to 1,100 square feet that would need to be obtained somehow by the developer. So I'm not sure what more could be done. And I think that I respect Dr. Jones' opinion, but without having the engineering study, it just seems to me 10 more feet, 20 feet off the existing center line is quite a deviation from the existing road.
Well, I'm inclined to think that if this is approved and as it moves forward, it may have to come to the conclusion to work itself out anyway. Because the number one item on here is gonna have to be the acquirement and the dedication of the developer to acquire the right-of-way. I mean, my question would be is, what if you never can obtain, or that right-of-way becomes such a case that it is very long and dragged out? I mean, that's gonna cause both sides, I think, to have to maybe really relook at this, to have to come to some solution. I mean, both parties have identified and have both stated that the roundabout is the only way to go here. And so it's a matter of how that's gonna be approved and what that approval process is gonna look like. So, and they have to bring their plan, the formal plan. Where does that come back to? Just back to planning? Does it go back to the planning commission at all after this point in time, or what is in that process?
No, it would just be administratively reviewed by staff.
I'll speak to this. First, I want to say to the residents, having been in a very, very similar situation, I understand your concern, okay? And as I look at this, I would like to see some alternatives, but I don't really see how we can move it any further than it already has. As Mr. Selesky said, keeping alignment and thinking about the future of County Road 5 and the traffic and those type of things. So if there were an alternative to see, I would be glad to see it, but I don't see that there is. So I'm inclined to vote yes for this.
Any other questions or comments? Mr. Soslowski?
No, I mean, just procedurally, it feels like we perhaps
Okay.
make a motion on this, but then Dr. Jones may want to.
Can I ask a question real quick, Mayor? Condition number 2 of the recommendation was that all improvements to the intersection of Larimer County Road 5 and Oakmont Drive shall be completed and approved by the town prior to any issuance of any building permits for single-family residential development. Isn't there a way that could be done concurrently, I guess, Mr. Hornbeck? That's where we're not holding up the single-family, permits from being done, but yet the improvements can be underway, but not necessarily completed, I guess. Approved, but not necessarily completed before the residential single-family was issued.
That would be outside the norm of standard procedure. There's a number of concerns with allowing single-family home construction prior to completion of all improvements with the subdivision. One of those, Mr. Ballstead outlined kind of the moving target of the roundabout, but just on, speaking on a typical subdivision without kind of these questions, we don't want to rely on a certificate of occupancy and holding that to ensure improvements, as that puts a new homeowner in a bind, and town staff in a bind, when it's really a third party, the developer, who needs to complete things. And so we try and avoid that at all costs.
Right, and I would just add, Mr. Rinnemeyer, that I didn't hear the applicant say that they wanted to tag to CO. I mean, that would buy them about 6 months, maybe, from start of a home to CO. But what I heard is they want to talk to the town about alternate ways to address the subdivision and maybe phase it. And so I don't think that they're necessarily proposing to just tag to CO. I think they're proposing that this improvement wouldn't happen before some houses receive a CO. So they're still here, but I heard them basically say, would you consider other alternative ways to address the traffic? And they would in fact be seeking COs prior to having that done. So,
Well, all of that being said, I would concur with Mr. Bennett's assessment. That's why I asked my question about the ability to move this any more to the west and how that would incur on the Jaeger property. So I would be inclined to vote for the approval as is.
Could I ask the applicant's engineer, is it John?
Okay, I want to interrupt here for a second.
You're what?
We're not a hearing.
Oh, yeah.
If we're going to go back into facts upon which any one of you may make a decision tonight, we need to reopen the public hearing.
Oh, we don't need to do that. Okay, Madam Mayor, I'm going to make a motion that we table resolution 2018-95 to our next regular meeting to see if any accommodations can be made between the two parties to improve the design of this roundabout.
All right, we have a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
Thanks very much.
I'll second. Go ahead, vote. Okay, go vote. I'll second, yeah.
Okay, there's a second. So, any additional comment?
Can I ask a question then about that? Okay. If we were to table it until 2 weeks from now,
well, and it would be more than that. Our meeting is canceled on November 12th
That's
for
right.
Veterans Day, so it would
Okay.
be on November 26th. So it would be a month and 4 days.
okay, so 2 parts of my question. One, what are the consequences to anybody on that? And what's the possibility that there's other options? So that's getting close to a public hearing again, I know.
Well, you're asking for information with respect to the pending motion, which is a motion to postpone until November 26th.
Right.
And you're asking, I didn't understand the first
Uh,
question.
What would the consequences of doing that? What are the consequences of postponing?
The consequences of delay, I don't believe there was any record made this evening
Okay.
about that.
Okay.
And the follow-up
The
question?
second question
Mr.
was,
Bennett?
this slips back in the public hearing, I guess. What are there possible alternatives?
Well, the record did cover some possible alternatives, so that, I think the record is complete as to answer that question, and I don't recommend you reopen
I don't want to
the public hearing to take testimony on that point.
Okay.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor and a second to postpone and bring back to a date certain.
November 26th.
November 26th.
26.
Okay, all in favor vote yes, opposed no. And the motion passes 5-2, with the yeas being Baker, Bennett, Melendez, Rennemeyer, and Jones, and the nays being Wilson and Sislowski. Okay, so
Okay.
we can move on? Okay, we will move on. Move on to item 4 of our agenda, which is a public hearing. And Mr. Hornbeck, I believe you wanted to make a statement with regards to item 5 and item 4 and item 5 before we proceed further.
Yes, Madam Mayor, Town Board. At the request of the applicant, the Planning Commission continued these agenda items until their November 7th meeting. Therefore, staff recommends Town Board continue these items until the November 26th Town Board meeting.
Okay. Do we have to make a motion on that one then too?
We will need a motion to postpone on the applicant's request.
Okay.
Madam Mayor, I move that we postpone ordinance number 2018-1573 and the public hearing to date certain November 26th.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor moving for
Second.
postponement and a second from Mr. Kozlowski. All in favor vote yes, opposed no. And it passes unanimously. So we will be moving items 4 and 5 to the November 24th or 26th meeting. Moving on then to item 6. Again, another public hearing and ordinance amending section 17 of the Town of Windsor Municipal Code regarding landscape requirements. Legislative discussion with Paul Hornbeck giving presentation. Is there a motion to open public hearing?
Madam Mayor, I move that we open public hearing.
Second.
Motion on the floor from Mr. Redemeyer with a second from Mr. Dr. Jones to open public hearing. All in favor vote yes, opposed no. And public hearing is now open. Mr. Hornbeck.
Thank you. The ordinance enclosed in your materials is a comprehensive update to the town's landscape code. It's based on the premise that the existing standards have been largely successful in strengthening the character and quality of development, but are in need of a few updates. The existing standards have been in place since 2006. The primary goals of these updates are to reorganize the landscape standards to be easier to understand and apply, to expand and refine the buffer yard requirements, to better address water conservation in landscaping, and to address other minor clarifications and modifications. The reorganization is largely moving towards more tables to express the requirements. The image on the left is the current standards, a lot of text. We're trying to move towards more tables to be sure to more concisely express the requirements of the code. It will also include graphics such as this one that's labeling the different requirements in the reorganization. The water-wise requirements, as you're well aware, the continued growth of the region and high demand for water necessitates looking at water conservation. So we've proposed a number of new items. The current municipal code, the current landscape standards encourage water conservation, but they don't really have any teeth of requiring conservation. So we've introduced 6 primary items. Number 1 is requiring a minimum 65% of shrubs to be either very low or low water use. And those would be based on the appendix, which will list plants by their water requirements of very low, low, medium, or high. And number 2, a 15% maximum of shrubs and trees shall be high water use. Number 3, medium and high water grass turf areas should be limited to high use or high visibility areas. However, there'd be no restriction on how low water grasses would be used. Sites over 3 acres shall use hydrozones, which are groupings of like irrigation needs, so you don't overwater plants. Rain shutoff sensors would be required, so sites aren't watering when recent rain has been received. And number 6, allowing rock beds to count for up to 20% of landscaped area, not to exceed 3,000 square feet individually, provided there is some visual interest through the use of boulders, shrubs, western collectibles, and things of that nature. And that's in response to one of the work session comments received on the landscape section. Buffer yards are currently included in the landscape standards. However, we are proposing to expand their use. So a buffer yard essentially is buffering between two uses that are generally not seen as compatible next to each other. Currently, the code requires 15 to 20 foot wide buffers based on building size for commercial or industrial development next to residential. We are looking to expand that to multifamily next to residential, as well as further refining the exact requirements, generally increasing those requirements. They would be based on a few different tables. So there'd be 4 options, A through D, which are increasing in the amount of landscaping required. And they would be based on this table, which assigns a requirement based on the adjacent zoning districts. For example, a multifamily development next to a single-family development would require a type 2 buffer, and that's actually would be a type B. Those don't align in this presentation, but the intent is this table dictates the buffer yard requirement. We're also providing the limited buffer yards for constrained sites that are smaller sites or have unique topography, things of that nature that can't fit the standard buffer yard. We'd also be eliminating the buffer yard requirement for central business, as that's generally a more urban town center feeling without very much landscaping. And we'd be requiring a mix of shade, ornamental, and evergreen trees, which would ensure year-round buffering as well as seasonal interest. And this material I'm not going to go into depth on unless there's specific questions, but it provides a comparison of what buffer yards required versus what's proposed. On the left is current and right's proposed. The other changes that are proposed, a number of minor changes based on simplifying and clarifying requirements. Further language has been added to clarify maintenance responsibility and ongoing compliance. Another fairly large change is the reduction of landscape requirements for large industrial sites. We've seen sites such as the Great Western Industrial Park of 5, 10, 20 acres. When you're requiring 15% landscaping, it translates into an awful lot of landscaping that's rather onerous on the developer and doesn't serve as much, doesn't have as much of an impact. You're still able to landscape the right-of-way, parking lots and things of that nature with a lot lower percentage. So we've introduced an 8% requirement on the 3 to 10 acre sites and 5% on 10 acres. And that's, again, just for the industrial sites. At their October 17th meeting, the Planning Commission forwarded a recommendation of approval of the code amendment to Town Board. Staff requests the following be entered into the record: the staff memo, packet materials, any public testimony, and the staff recommendation. I do want to note there's a more thorough comparison of existing and proposed codes in your packet materials. Otherwise, I'm available for any questions.
Any questions, Mr. Baker?
I have a question about the, like a 20% about with rocks or something. If someone could choose greater, that would be fine. If they wanted to zero scape.
No, the 20% is the maximum.
That's the maximum. So someone can't zero scape.
You can't just do 100% gravel, correct? You are allowed, I do want to point out that we see now typically a shrub bed, well, they have shrubs, usually 3-4 feet spacing. Between those, they can do rock or stone. It doesn't have to be turf. We're not proposing any changes.
You just don't want a rock yard.
Correct. We don't want to see turf go to completely rock. Yeah.
And what's a Western collectible? What do you consider?
I was waiting for that question.
Why?
It would, I mean, the intent is to add interest, not just a gravel field. whether it's boulders, a bridge, or structures. The Western Collectible is a farm, an antique farm.
Wagon wheel.
Wagon wheel, exactly. Things of that nature.
Is that limited? I missed that.
Limited in what way?
Well, could someone just have a bunch of collectibles?
It would require site plan approvals. It doesn't specify a maximum number of collectibles.
Can't have too many wagon wheels.
An old skeleton?
Yeah, skull.
Okay,
All right.
any further questions, Mr. Bennett?
No, that's it. Thank
Okay,
you.
Mr. Bennett.
Does Western Collectible include aluminum palm trees?
I don't believe that would qualify.
It's not really my question.
Plastic flamingos, you don't really wanna have.
Plastic flamingos?
That won't cost you.
Okay, serious now. Talking about the buffers between small industrial buildings, I'm just asking for my understanding. Building of greater than 25,000 square feet next to residential. What we're doing is we're increasing the buffer, and we are increasing the amount of landscaping. So my question is, I want to hear that because we are now requiring a certain amount of water-wise plants, that we're really not going to be requiring additional water consumption.
That's a great point.
Did that make sense?
I think I understand, yeah, that we are requiring potentially more landscaping in some situations.
More buffer, more landscaping.
Right.
Next to residential, so I see the reason for that, but what does that do to water consumption? And I'm assuming that because we're requiring now certain 65% water-wise trees or whatever it was, that maybe you haven't done the math, but I'm assuming it's not gonna require a lot more water.
Yeah, I'm not able to quantify
Okay.
exactly, but yeah, and they're welcome to use more than 65%. They could use 100% low
Water-wise,
water
right.
plants. Yeah.
Okay. So we don't know for sure, but that would be, I think, having the requirement of certain percentage of water-wise plants, I think is a real step forward. Second question I have, if I may, the feedback from stakeholders. How has that been incorporated into the recommendations?
Do you have a specific?
I do not,
Okay.
sorry. I know you met with stakeholders, got input. I just want to know that we addressed their concerns and ideas.
We definitely try to. We heard that the landscape standards were difficult to work with.
Yeah.
That was, I think, an overriding theme of what we tried to accomplish, is make it easier to apply.
That was one of those points.
So I hope we've succeeded in that.
Well, and if I may, along
Yeah.
those lines, I was gonna see if, and I don't wanna catch you off guard, Miss Miller, but do you have any, I mean, I don't know if you looked at, because you're the one who deals with more business coming in and might have heard, questions or concerns or comments. And, do you think this addresses in the right direction of where we needed to go based on where we were?
I actually was not consulted on this, and I did not reach out and read it
Okay,
on my own time.
okay.
So, I can speak to the industrial part specifically. That does seem to address the major concerns on some of the larger lots in the industrial parks.
Okay.
Yeah, what we did there was we reduced the requirement of landscaping on large industrial, right?
Correct.
That's what I thought, okay.
Did you have additional
No,
questions?
no, ma'am.
Just
Mr.
real quick,
Sosnowski?
how will these requirements overlay or interplay with special districts, HOAs, et cetera?
Yeah, the discussion of the HOAs came up at the work session, and our approach was that's kind of a separate effort in terms of education and putting together best practices for HOAs. I know we talked about that some, but in terms of how these interrelate, these are minimums. An HOA could require more, they couldn't allow less.
Because and only because I'm somewhat familiar, but an HOA is gonna be also covered by Kiowa, which is the Colorado Community Ownership, whatever. and it's a state law that, you know, you have to obey that. The Kiowa, I know, having looked at this, says that you can have no rule, et cetera, that prohibits someone from having xeriscape, low water use plantings. And I don't know whether, you've addressed that to some extent, but to the extent you have required some plantings here, if it's within an HOA, you may run into some problems where it's bumping into the state Kiowa.
No, I think that's a good point. It might have to be addressed on a case by case with those
Yeah.
HOAs. Yeah.
But otherwise, it really looks good.
Paul, do you want, this doesn't pertain to single family, correct? This is mainly industrial, commercial, buffering along the arterials and that sort of thing.
The vast majority of it is everything except single family.
Yeah.
I don't recall the exact, we included a percentage for single family lots that they need to be landscaped, and we left it fairly open-ended, if not dictating what that landscaping is, but to prevent a lot that's completely gravel, completely paved over, requiring a minimum percentage of landscaping on single family.
And it can be low water.
Anything additional? I guess, I mean, I think this is overall a good plan, and I understand why we're limiting the lawn area. But sometimes, like you have an example in here, if some, I mean, it's such a small piece that we're gonna enforce them to have, just so that it shows a green lawn, but then they gotta have to mow it, and there's additional taking care of that, which I'm wondering if maybe just even some other landscaping would have been as beneficial as requiring them that they have to have green grass there. I mean, we have strips all along 392, that in the summer, they are, I mean, I don't know if you noticed this summer, but they were brown, they were full of weeds anyway, so I'm not sure that, I mean, I think there should maybe be an alternative to enforcing those green areas.
So maybe I didn't explain it well, but there's no requirement for turf anywhere.
Oh, there is, okay, I thought I read in here somewhere that in a very visible site, they had to do something.
Right, and so that's referring to, if you are using turf, it should be
Oh,
limited.
then it should be in those places.
Should be limited to those high visibility, high use areas.
Okay,
Yeah.
so it's not they have to, oh, well, okay, very
Correct,
good,
yeah.
okay. Good. Okay, anything else? And we have no public left, so there's.
You guys don't count. You guys aren't public.
So if there's no further questions, I'd seek a motion to close public hearing.
So moved. Second.
A motion on the floor from Mr. Sosowski with a second from Mr. Baker to close public hearing. All in favor vote yes, opposed no. Public hearing is now closed. Moving on to item 7, ordinance number 2018-1574, an ordinance amending section 17 of the Town of Windsor Municipal Code regarding landscape requirements. Mr. Hornbeck, anything further?
Nothing to add.
Okay, anything further from town board members? Okay, if not, is there a motion?
Madam Mayor, I move that we approve ordinance number 2018-1574.
Second.
Motion on the floor from Mr. Rennemeyer with a second from Pro Tem Bennett. All in favor vote yes, opposed no. And the ordinance carries unanimously. Moving on to item 8, ordinance number 2018-1575, an ordinance adopting Article 11 of Chapter 10 of the Windsor Municipal Code concerning the public consumption of alcohol within the town of Windsor. Chief Klemick.
Madam Mayor, Town Board, this was Eric's item, but he had very important business. That's his anniversary tonight, so he did not want to be here, and I don't blame him. The state legislature changed the definition of 3.2 alcohol. It's been taken away, so our ordinance for alcohol in the park has always been 3.2 alcohol only in our parks. So with that going away, we have to address what we're gonna do with alcohol as far as our parks go. We've had several meetings and comments. I think we actually met with the board before on this topic regarding alcohol. So our proposal basically is to ban open containers and alcohol in public places, but to allow alcohol in our public parks only, with the exception of Chimney Park at this time, basically athletic events, unless it's by a licensed premise process. So basically then the park, when they have the beer garden, that is a licensed premise, so it has to be fenced, it has to be controlled, and it's operated by someone with a liquor license. So we would move forward for a year with this process, evaluate it, and at the end of 1 year, if it would sunset, we'd have the ability to come back and make it permanent or make any changes. The park staff will create a tracking form to track the use of how much alcohol events have alcohol at them for their rentals. The police department, we will monitor any activity involving any conflicts that have alcohol related as a nexus to the event. And should there be issues with that at the end of the year, we come back to you and make another recommendation as to how to proceed with alcohol in our public parks.
Okay,
Any questions?
any questions? Mr. Soslowski?
Just on the repealer, Mr. McCarter, is it required that we have a 1-year sunset?
No, it's not. It was an option that we discussed with you to give it time to experiment with it, see how it goes. And then if it seems okay, then roughly a year from now, you would bring it back and make it permanent, as permanent as anything can be.
Okay, thanks, I now remember.
Okay.
Okay, any additional questions? Okay, if not, I'd seek a motion.
Madam Mayor, I move that we approve ordinance number 2018-1575.
Second.
Who was that?
Mary.
I have a motion on the floor for Ms. Reddemeyer with a second for Mr. Wilson approving ordinance 2018-1575. All in favor vote yes, opposed no. And the ordinance passes unanimously. Moving on to item 9, ordinance number 2018-1576. An ordinance repealing, amending, adding, and readopting portions of Chapter 6, Article 1 of the Windsor Municipal Code concerning the elimination of 3-2 beer. Ms. Emo.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, Town Board. This, I'm just tagging on to the chief's presentation for this, because this really is the housekeeping ordinance that cleans up our code, removing all references to 3-2 beer. And the legislature this year also created a new Colorado liquor code and moved everything from Title 12, where all of our current references are in our code, to Title 44. So I went through the code and hopefully found all of the references and made the changes and have incorporated them into this ordinance before you. The only other thing that I wanted to point out is our current ordinance, the way we operate it with the 3-2 beer, is it was basically deemed to be its own entity, and it was we charged a fee and a taxing fee or something. I don't even know how all that operated, but we're repealing all of that because there won't be any 3-2 beer licenses issued anymore. So that's all been repealed, and then we're renumbering the codes to fit so it's all chronological as it goes with those items repealed.
Okay. Any questions for Ms. Emo? Okay. Seeing none, is there a motion?
Madam Mayor, I make a motion that the town board pass ordinance number 2018-1576 as presented.
Second.
Motion on the floor from Mr. Wilson with a second from Pro Tem Bennett for approving ordinance 2018-1576. All in favor vote yes, opposed no. It's on.
Okay, try voting one more time.
Okay.
Mr. Jones?
And the ordinance passes unanimously. Moving on then to item 11, since we did 10 earlier, financial report for September 2018. Mr. Moyer.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. In your packet is the report, our financial report for September, which marks the end of the third quarter. Our benchmark for our budget would be at 75% for both revenue and expenditures. Shane covered this in his report on Friday, so I won't add too much to it here tonight. Just to say that we cleared the 75% benchmarks in our tax collections. We have about collected all of our property tax for the year, and we are way ahead of on the sales tax collection as well. We, as far as our expenditures go, again with the 75% usage, our operation and maintenance was 64%, capital 35%, for a combined total of 53%. So just in short, we're in a good spot here going into the end of the year. Again, in the interest of time, and I'll allot some of my time to Ms. Miller to speak here tonight, but I would answer any questions you may have. Other than that, that is my report for September.
Any questions for Mr. Moyer? Okay.
All right.
Thanks for a good report.
Sure.
And for doing everything that you're doing to make our budget work and getting all the information to us as well.
Thank you.
Make sure you thank all your staff too, and Ricky especially. Moving on to item 12, our economic development report. Ms. Miller.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and Town Board. I'll try to be brief. I apologize, Crystal's handing out our prospect report, so it'll be good to kind of go over some of these numbers since I have not gone over any of these numbers with you yet this year. So I did the activity for this report based on through September 30th of this year. So just a quick list of speaking engagements that Jill and I have been involved with. I was really most excited about the BizWest inaugural real estate summit that I got to do this year. I think that was really key. I don't think anybody really knew. It was a whole room full of realtors and brokers, and they got to really see how busy Windsor really is. So that was kind of awesome. We have a lot of groundbreakings. Thank you guys so much for participating in all those. Hopefully there'll be more, and I'm sure I missed some on there. Definitely a lot of just activity and definitely some stuff going on. So we've had 84 prospects year to date from 2018. 71 of those are still active. As you're well aware, a lot of the times we don't ever hear back from anybody about whether the prospect has moved on or where they landed, especially when they come in at the state level or Metro Denver EDC. So usually every 6 months I'll just purge them out and clean them out. I save them on file, but I don't count them in the totals anymore. So right now we're still, overall total, we have 76 active because I have 2 from 2016 that I'm still working on and 3 from 2017. We've had 20 prospect visits, which means companies or representatives for companies have come into town and actually met with me about their opportunity here in town. We've had 9 company announcements, and I'm sure there has been more. We just count the ones that we've worked with closely. We've had 74 business visits. That's the business retention visits that Jill and I and Shane have gone on. I think some of you may have been involved with that as well. Assisted 80 miscellaneous companies. So basically that just gets a call if they're looking for specific documents or assistance or help, but they're not in an expansion, they're not growing, they're not coming here. Something that we've had to do and take our time to do. And we've done 176 community outreach and events. So Jill and I, the first 9 months of this year, have participated in chamber business after hours, other events, regional events since the beginning of the year. So I just joke that no wonder I'm tired and can't hold my water and knock my water bottle over and make lots of noise for Jill, right, when she's presenting. So sorry about that. But we have Prospect activity by type, so 60% are still industrial. That's the type of companies that are still looking at coming here. We have 9 different categories that they're looking at, so including agricultural, distribution, energy, manufacturing. Biggest movement is 35% manufacturing, but the second largest group was retail, and professional technical services has moved up quite a bit, which is nice. That's your R&D facilities, your technical scientific service oriented, higher paying jobs typically in those categories. So those are our top 3 industries that those prospects are in that are looking at Windsor. Where we get our leads from, again, 31% is from the company. That's awesome. That means they know to directly contact us. That's really fantastic. That's a goal that I always try to improve, is having the real estate community and the companies know that there's an office here to help them and that they reach out to us directly. That's 22% actually comes from upstate Colorado, and 21% comes from the new real estate database called Catalyst. If you'll remember, at the beginning of the year, I was a little bit nervous. We are down in prospect count, and that's mainly because Xceligent was the database that went bankrupt at the end of last year. Now we used Catalyst. There seems to be some resistance in brokers uploading or making requests through that system. I think it's not as easy maybe to use as the other system, and or when things are good, you don't always have to use maybe all the venues to shout out what you're looking for. So we have 49% are still looking for existing space, which can be difficult again if you don't have it, which a lot of people don't if you have an existing industrial space, not only in Windsor but northern Colorado and the state as a whole. Prospect by square footage, still the majority of them are all looking for under 10,000 square feet. Huge uptick in 10 to 20,000 this time for square footage, but again, between both of those, well over half of them are under 25,000 square feet in space is what people are looking for. The last time I did this report at the beginning of the year, which was for the year of 2017, we talked about what I would hopefully call a blip, which was more people wanted to lease rather than own. It has flip-flopped back again, so 55% of the prospects are looking to own, which to me is a good sign. They're making investments in the communities and the places that they're locating in. They don't just want to lease some space, and especially if we don't have existing space, if they want to own, sometimes they're more prone to actually build a building and own it as well, which is nice. We had 13 non-qualified leads, and again, always by type and size typically is how we lose out to those. Either they're existing industrial with acreage, we don't have that, or the size. We even had a request up to 1 million square feet, so we just don't qualify for existing. Nobody has that really in the state. Again, for BR&E, we had 74 company visits so far in 2018. Jill is currently working on 4 more expansion projects. And you'll see here, here's the year-to-date for 2018, we're about 83 prospects, which by the end of the 3rd quarter, we only have 3 quarters left to develop, and they're the slower, I would say they're probably the slower quarters. So you can see the trend is definitely, I think, down a little bit, mainly because one of our sources just isn't producing as many leads as normal. So sorry I went through that rather quickly, but always available to talk, and this will be up on the website. Plus I have extra copies, but this will be up on the website tomorrow.
Okay. Any questions, Mr. Cicilline?
Thank you. Just quickly, in the industry chart, pie chart, I didn't see anything that would be, and I don't know what you call it, restaurants or food service, or what the industry would be. Does that fall under retail? Or
It is retail. It's retail trade, retail. So we consider it all retail because it's sales tax oriented.
Were there any restaurants in that bucket?
Yeah, there's a lot. There's still, most of them are quick serve, I will say, which is like the fast food or quick casual concepts. But I am doing a lot of outreach. Just give a shout out, Rib and Chop House in Cheyenne. If you're listening, we'd like to have you here. Chief is not listening to me.
I will second
Chief,
that.
I know.
Can we vote?
Yeah, thumbs up from the chief. Yeah, I just reached out to him again yesterday, actually. Last night I sent him another email saying, you know, and I sent the Ricky B space actually in downtown Windsor, and I said, here's how it's divided, you know, please come out. I'm still trying to push for you guys to come out. Please, you know, follow up. So I'm hopeful. The last email that I got back from him said that they would do a tour, so hopefully we'll see. I know we need sit-down restaurants.
Good.
So. Yes.
I also had a question about the active prospects by industry. Last year retail was our number 1 category, this year it's number 2. Does that mean there's been a drop-off of retail applicants? And where I'm going with this is, the theory is more rooftops means more retail.
Usually, traditionally, it does. And you saw quite a few announcements actually coming out, or some of the ones that have been announced. So the Human Bean, the Come and Go, the Doug's Day Diner, all those are not included in there anymore. So we've seen the Fuzzy's Taco, all of those have been announced. So those don't go into the existing category. So when you have half a dozen that have come in already, then that obviously diminishes the pool that you've had. I have not seen a huge uptick in that from the quick serve side of things. It also has to do with, who knows, with the market and there's so many complications that go into retail with the franchisees and their right to actually build, and their financial situation that fluctuate the demand and the driver for that. So meaning, you may have to pay $300,000 out of pocket just to have the right to even then go buy land and build and put in a restaurant. So it's really up to the owner of that franchisee, that right from a quick serve standpoint and or national chains to have the right, they have the geographic right to build in certain areas, and it just becomes, I can't predict, why some people won't build or won't move forward with it, but I definitely see a need for it in Windsor, and it's the biggest conundrum in like 20 years that I've had in doing economic development is why we can't get more sit-down restaurants in Windsor. It's very, very interesting with the wealth and the discretionary income and the population and the lack of existing. I mean, what we have is fantastic, don't get me wrong. We have a lot of wonderful, amazing restaurants here. But it's just, I keep trying to tout that and say, I really don't understand that. There's a small margin in restaurant industry, and it's a lot of startup costs. So I keep pushing like the existing spaces that we have, like the Ricky B's, that have that infrastructure in place, like the Hoods and all of those things that are in place. Those are easier for companies to come into sometimes, whether they purchase them or lease them, than they are to actually buy all that stuff brand new and build a building and go ground up.
Anything else? Thank you.
Thank you.
Communications from our town attorney.
We have an executive session this evening, so that's next on your agenda.
Okay, communications from town staff, and there's an item A, site plan, Southgate Business Park, 7th filing, lot 1. Did you have something you wanted to say about that, Mr. Volstead?
I just wanted to call your attention to it in the packet. This is in lieu of the former site plan presentations. We received the Southgate oil and gas office building submittal last week, and so we're getting it to you early, and we'll be turning it around very expeditiously. So, just wanted to point that out.
That's right next to the storage area we reviewed.
Correct, just south
few
of the
weeks ago.
dairy.
Okay.
Mr. Baker.
I see pictures of fencing. When they originally submitted, looked like chain link and the slats. Obviously, they've cleaned that up and are going with standard fencing.
Yeah, we just got it last week, so we're in the middle of reviewing it as well. But yes, the chain link is not allowed, and they are aware of that, and they are working on alternatives.
Thanks.
Okay. Any other communications from any other staff members? Okay. Communications from town manager.
Yes, ma'am. I just want to circle back to the future town board meetings. We didn't get a chance to talk about that during the work session. And so I just want to point out, we have reserved October 29th, next Monday, to do kind of a wrap-up budget meeting. I think the direction I got from the board is you'd rather just wait until November 5th. And so we have that on there, but I just want to be clear that we'll not plan on being here on the 29th. So that'll be erased. I also want to point out, it's not on here yet, but in discussions with our venerable town attorney, he reminded me that he and I both need to receive our evals from the board. And so we will slap that executive session on November 26th. And then I think on December 17th, if we don't have a scheduled work session, if we don't have any business, it would be a social event, a potential to let the town attorney buy everybody a drink, and for me to go out the back door.
Just one?
Not really. So that's kind of a tentative social calendar note on the future meetings.
December
Yes, sir.
Okay. Communications from town board members.
Madam Mayor, just
Yes.
very quickly, when I call this meeting of Housing Authority people together, these are the questions I have so far. Long-term plan for self-sustaining, the need for executive director. Ken mentioned overseeing the construction, who will do that. Other sources of income available, and ability to raise rents. And if you think of any other questions, just email me or give
The
me
other
a
question
call.
I would have is, what is the current person who's got a position, that paid position?
Okay.
I would like to know more about, like, how is that paid? How is she paid? And is she part-time? I'm guessing she's part-time. And is she still part of the picture of the plan? This is she plus this other person would be an addition, or this person would be a replacement of? I don't know what exactly the request or need is.
And Dr. Jones, the three questions that I had down from Mr. Bennett were, why can't they raise the rents? Why can't they raise more money just based on their patrons? We need a better outline on what they need to do to become self-sustaining. They said 10 years, but is that just, do they need to add 500 more residents, or what's their path? And then the third one is, are there other sources of income? And I don't know if you're referring to like Weld County, other governments, or, other pots of money they could look to, other than the town for this.
I know they've reached out, but they should, I think, give us the information of what they've tried to do. And along with that is question two, in the short term, possibility of contracting services. If they are starting construction this spring or summer, and the present person's gone, who's gonna be overseeing that? So maybe they can contract service for less money with Loveland.
Right, and to me, I think a question that I would ask is just, if the town board determines that you can fund some of this position, but if it comes up short of 95,000, what does that look like? If the board said, look, we're willing to contribute $25,000 towards this effort, is that too little to have them accomplish anything? Could they wrap a plan around a lesser amount of money, or is it really at 95,000 and all or nothing?
Okay.
I guess as long as we're adding questions,
They're all full-time.
and I don't know exactly how you would phrase it, or maybe it's buried in your others, but I'm curious to see the business model that they developed when they first started going down this path. And how is it they planned on financing these operations, and now are suddenly surprised that they need an executive director and they didn't build in that cost.
Well, I think it's all related to the number of units that are, coming online. They've been able to handle it up to this point, but with another 123, and if they get Governor's Farm, another 50, they're up to almost 200 units total.
Well, maybe they should have stopped at 100.
Okay.
Well, it relates to
Well,
what the
there's
mayor just brought
demand.
up too. Previous to Bill, John Moore, another retired, well, I think he wasn't
He
retired.
was somewhat
Semi-retired,
But-
but they have been able to rely on a retired person to step in and do the work for free.
Hint, hint. Yeah.
Hint,
They need a
hint.
retired
You'd be-
person.
you'd be awesome at it.
For free.
Your knowledge of
Okay.
contracts, you'd be awesome.
Okay. We do have an executive session, so I'll take a motion to move into executive session. And then, once we have voted, we'll take like a 10-minute break, and then we'll commence back there. So is there a motion?
Madam Mayor, I move that we move into executive session pursuant to Colorado Revised Statute 24-6-402, subsection 4E and I, for the purpose of determining positions relative to matters that may be subject to negotiations, developing strategy for negotiations, and instructing negotiators with respect to water treatment options.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion on the floor of a second to move into executive session. All in favor, vote yes. Opposed, no. And we will move into executive session shortly. Hey, Kelly, I just have a quick.
I know, yeah, you can see.